This morning, we're bringing you the committee investigation live. That's happening right now. So we're not going to waste any time. It's just starting. So let's get into that. Today.
Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 108 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, fondly known as the Mighty OGO. Thank you to Northern Perspectives for that shout out as well for the Mighty OGO. Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3C and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, October 17th, 2022, the committee is meeting to consider matters related to the ArriveCan application. As always, a reminder not to put earpieces next to the microphones as it causes feedback and potential injury to our very vital translation department. Thank you very much. Welcome back, Mr. Firth, to OGO. Just quickly, colleagues, just to explain, Mr. Firth's lawyer, Mr. Brent Timmins, will be with us throughout the meeting with his client. He is not, Mr. Timmins, though, is not a witness, and thus he may not address the committee. The council may be on Zoom call with the witness, and they may speak directly to their clients, but not to the committee or committee members. I note for committee members that they should only question the witness and not speak or ask questions of the lawyer who is not appearing as a witness. Mr. Firth may from time to time refer to and talk to Mr. Timmins, in which case he will turn off his mic. If it is during one of your interventions, we will pause the clock for that moment. We will suspend for 10 minutes after the first two rounds to give Mr. Firth and Mr. Timmins, as well as members, a break. And then after that, it'll be every 2 rounds we will break for, or we'll suspend for 5 minutes. My intent, colleagues, is to have the clerk swear in Mr. Firth, if that is fine with everyone. I see that, Mr. Clerk. We'll go ahead. And then we'll have Mr. Firth for an opening 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Firth, I just sent you an email. You have the choice of either a religious oath or a solemn affirmation. I'll perhaps give yourself, Mr. Timmins, a second to see that email, but I can also walk you through that. So please do let me know if you prefer the oath or the solemn affirmation.
The oath, please.
Okay, in the case of the oath, I will read the following passage and you can respond. Do you swear that the evidence you shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Firth. We'll turn the floor over to you for an opening statement. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. This is my third time before the committee. I've been compelled to be here. The last month, virtually, everything reported about my company in the media and stated about me and my company has been false. I have submitted to the committee a complete list of all contracts we've been awarded from the government in our history. I have included the nominal value of the contract, and more importantly, the full amounts we have invoiced the government under those contracts. We have also included the total amount we have paid our subcontractors under those contracts. And as you can see, the amounts paid to GC Strategies are not the astronomical amount being claimed by some committee members. Since my last appearance before you, this committee has summoned many departments and their representatives with whom we have had dealings. The committee informed each of these representatives that we were criminals, forgers, and fraudulent. The committee said that if they did not terminate all our contracts and suspend our ability to obtain contracts, that they were negligent and complicit in misusing taxpayer money. The committee also strongly encouraged each department to refer these matters to the RCMP. As a result, and not surprisingly, each department complied, terminating our agreements and our ability to continue government work. In addition, they have confirmed the matters have been requested and referred to the RCMP for investigation. As a result, although I welcome an independent investigation, for it will exonerate me, and the committee has not chosen to wait for the results of that investigation, I will not be able to answer questions about the matters referred to the RCMP. I trust you'll understand. GC Strategies has appeared before this committee twice, giving hours of testimony. We have also cooperated throughout the entire study and provided all documentation requested of us. We have been portrayed as reluctant witnesses by some committee members and media. However, the truth is, we've always been accessible, willing to answer committee members' questions in writing. The committee has not once reached out for a response to question. Instead, the committee exercised the most extreme measures, and we had the full weight of the government come down on us, compelling us to be here by subpoena, knowing full well this is against medical advice as outlined in our doctor's notes we have provided as part of the evidence package. I'm certain any medical professional would attest that the threat of arrest and detainment would cause undue stress. Since our first publicized appearance, myself and my business partner have received hundreds of threatening and abusive emails, all of which have been documented and they have been shared. I would read these aloud, but to be frank, they are vile and not suitable for any audience. The nature of these communications, threatening our lives and the lives of our family and children, have given rise to our reasonable ask for future appearances to not be televised. The chair unanimously and without justification denied our request, intent on isolating Mr. Anthony and myself from one another and broadcasting to the result of the widest possible audience. Over the past few months, we've had images of our homes and the addresses of our personal dwellings published across media titles, journalists turning up to our private property, confronting family members, and our young children approached, and their privacy violated with strangers taking photographs of them whilst in the hockey changing rooms. Surely the members of this committee can agree this isn't acceptable output from this process. We offered to appear in public, but requested not to be televised over these concerns. We were rejected, we've been separated, and we're being televised. We can only conclude that this televised nature of today's meeting aids in political goal scoring while simultaneously using us as media fodder at the expense of our health and the safety of our families. This is neither fair nor reasonable. I've shown up and will answer questions to the best of my ability, but may require frequent breaks. I will answer questions for as long as I am able, but cannot guarantee I will be able to make it all the way through. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Firth. And we just ask if you do require a different break that you just advise us and let us know. We'll start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes, please.
Mr. Firth, it's correct that you have legal counsel with you this morning?
That's correct.
So this is the first time of your appearances where you have a lawyer present but didn't in previous appearances. Have you ever lied to a parliamentary committee before?
I think your previous testimony, you see the answer with that one, about the chalet and the cottage.
So is that a yes?
I advise you to go and watch my previous testimony.
Well, I was there and I asked the question, and of course you did lie about Mr. McDonald's secondary residence, quite famously on it not being a cottage, but in fact it being a chalet. Further, you lied about meeting government officials outside of government offices. And further, you lied about providing hospitality to government officials. There was a great deal of information that was requested of you that was not furnished to the committee, promising to tell the committee who in government contacted you about ArriveCan. That information hasn't been provided to us. You didn't disclose meetings with government officials, and you failed to provide documentation that the committee has asked you for. Last week, government officials announced that files concerning GC Strategies' role and involvement in ArriveCan have been sent to the RCMP. Did the government make you aware of that? Yes or no, please?
No, they have not.
Has the RCMP contacted you about ArriveCan?
No, they have not.
So the RCMP has, further, they have not interviewed you?
That is correct.
Have you been contacted by the RCMP about any work relating to any companies or ventures that you're involved in and their work with the Government of Canada or government officials?
No, I have not.
Do you know if your partner, Darren Anthony, has been contacted by the RCMP to the same effect?
I do know, and he has not.
if requested by the RCMP, will GC Strategies files, computers, emails, cell phones, and any area where data is stored or devices that have been used to communicate with the Government of Canada as part of their investigation into the Arrive scam, will you voluntarily submit that information to the RCMP?
We will deal directly with the RCMP once they contact us.
Sir, how much did you state in your previous appearance before this committee were you paid to work on ArriveCan?
For the ArriveCan application build, which is what we gave our numbers to the committee for last year, we said it was approximately $11 million was the application build.
Okay. The Auditor General, though you've said that all of the reporting about your company since your last appearance has been false, there's been heavy media reporting about the work of Canada's Auditor General. She detailed a different number. Is the information that the Auditor General has submitted incorrect?
Yes, it is. We actually were asked by the Auditor General to give comment prior to the report being published, whether we could support the numbers that they were putting in there. And actually, if you remember from my last previous testimony when I was ridiculed and being called disingenuous for not having the true cost of ArriveCan, we discussed the fact that there were 3 COVID-19 pandemic contracts. There was not one that was solely set aside for ArriveCan. So I can understand why it was hard for the Auditor General, with her also indicating that some of the task authorizations for ArriveCan could have had resources doing no work. Since my testimony and how I got the numbers there, I painstakingly went through every single invoice, spoke to every consultant, and got an understanding of what their level of effort was for the ArriveCan application build. And my numbers were in line with what Mr. Utano testified last time.
Okay. That's information that you ought to have had at your last appearance, but I'll take the Auditor General's word that that the number was in excess of $19 million, which of course is not the number that you submitted to this committee. At your second appearance before this committee, you testified that you did not meet with government officials outside of government offices, and we now know that you did that on multiple occasions. Why did you lie to this committee?
It was not a lie. I just was unaware. I hadn't checked all of my Outlook, but I can tell the committee today that I have met with officials outside of work.
Of course, we know that, sir, and we understand that you're telling us that now, having been caught in the lie. The question is, why did you believe it was necessary to attempt that deception before this parliamentary committee?
It wasn't a deception. I just wasn't informed of all the meetings that I had or had not had. I wouldn't have access to my Outlook.
What are the names of all of the government officials that you have met with outside of government offices?
I'm more than happy to provide that information in writing, but I'm not prepared to do that right now televised.
Are you able to name a single? Well, sir, it's not your discretion which answers that you're able to provide in writing. I'm asking you a question. Are you refusing to answer the question?
No, I gave you my answer. I'm not refusing to answer the question. I will give you the names.
So what are the names, sir? What are the names, sir?
That is, yeah, I have to interrupt. That is our time. Perhaps we can get back to it in the next round. Mr. Sousa, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Firth, before we begin, have you ever been approached separately by any individual members of this committee or any other committee besides the chair?
No, I have
People
not.
try to reach out to you?
Nobody from the committee has.
Okay. And you've already indicated how much you've received for work you've done relative to the contracts with ArriveCan. How much was that?
I gave over on October approximately $11 million worth of invoices.
And how much commission was that? How much did you receive for your services? I know you have costs there, right?
Yeah, this is the gross number. Would be approximately $2.5 million was gross.
You mean net to you?
Net to me.
Great.
Less expenses. That's exactly gross. Less expenses, less tax.
I understand. In terms of politicians, has any elected officials ever approached you to negotiate a contract?
No, we have not.
Has any politicians or members of parliament in the past approached you to do a contract?
No, sir.
So, your involvement, let's understand Cordell system for a sec. Explain to me that relationship and your involvement with that company.
So we had no relationship at all with Cordell. We purchased them in 2015 in April, and subsequently took 3 to 4 months to do a name change for CRA and PSBC to absorb those corporate requirements.
And Cordell had been a government contractor in the past?
I believe so, yes. We've never worked with Cordell ever, especially not prior to April 2015.
Is there involvement by you or GC Strategies prior to 2015? Have you been doing, how long have you been doing work for the government? I guess what I'm trying to get. How long have you been contracted?
Okay.
You besides GC Strategies?
Since 2007 was when I first started being in the IT section, services to the government.
And how much, do you recall how much you've received overall with the government of Canada, including those years?
How many contracts, sorry?
How much,
So
yeah, how many contracts, how much money you've made over that period of time?
Probably close to 100 contracts in totality from 2007 to 2023.
And that process was a similar way you're doing it now? You've arranged a contract and then you subcontract to service providers and skill sets? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I've been working in the IT staffing industry since 2007, like the other 636 other firms that are out there.
So that's normal practice in industry and in other governments as well? Do you know?
Yes. I can't speak to other industries, but in the federal government where I've been working since 2007, I can say that's normal practice.
And in your deliberations in coming here today, I mean, it's seen as been very tough on your family and yourself. What is it that people are perceived that you're trying to hide something? What is it that is concerning you here?
So it's actually just how this whole thing is being conducted. It's nothing about information and how it's being shared or even asking the questions. I mean, anybody in our industry or anybody in the 5,000 IT staffing firms employing $81,000, contributing $10 billion to the economy knows exactly what our staff and what our business model is. It's people that are misinformed and misled are the ones who are up in arms understanding this. There's a cost of doing business, and 636 other firms have the same business processes as we do.
So when ArriveCan came to be and the government was looking at trying to put this together, did you approach them or did someone approach you?
First time I knew that there was going to be a pandemic response contract, I was reached out to by PSPC. They were the ones who informed me that there was going to be a contract issued to us. It was a pre-contract email saying, just so you know, GC Strategies is being selected for a contract award of $2.35 million.
And who signed that email? Who did that come from?
That came from Angela Durgan of PSPC.
Prior to that, you had been dealing with Bottler AI and two founders of that company. And they're the ones that came to PSPC and came and complained about the processes of their contract, which there was no contract. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they issued concerns that there was privileged information, or I don't understand. Explain to me, what is Bottler AI's issue in regards to your engagement?
Well, that's actually a good question. We're still unclear of what the misconduct and allegations are towards our company. My understanding is it's being referred to the RCMP. We have not been contacted. So unfortunately, I cannot give comment on what those allegations are because we're just not aware what they are.
So you didn't have a contract and Bottler did not have a contract, but you were trying to promote Bottler in accessing opportunities with government situations. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. We actually, even at one time, well, we were starting to try and get them get their own vehicle so the government could miss the middleman out and go direct to Bottler.
How many people did Bottler employ at that point?
They were a two-person company out of a penthouse.
And so they were trying to gain contracts with government through your support, through your relationships, through your experience. Is that how it worked?
Yeah, we were offering free business development and sales leads to help them get contracts within the federal government.
Yeah, that's our time, Mr. Sousa. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 6. Go ahead, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Firth, thank you very much for being here with us today. I know how difficult this might be. I'll start with questions that are quite straightforward that have to do with testimony that you made in the past. In October 2022, at your first appearance before the committee, you stated that the government spoke to you to put in place a team that would work under its management and direction for a certain time as part of an equipment undertaking, which you agreed to. Thereafter, you said that you were very proud of the team that you provided to the Government of Canada, which managed and directed that team throughout the entire project. If I understood correctly, your role was solely to recruit. You didn't engage in any project management, any support. You didn't monitor the work that was being done by the people you recruited. Did I understand correctly?
That's correct. We also had no hand in operational budget management either.
OK. Merci. Dans le fond, vous...
Understood. So essentially, you were a middleman, an intermediary between the government and human resources when it came to payment. And you skimmed or you received 15 to 30% of the total amount owed.
Sorry, yeah, that is correct. We actually, it's in my evidence package I've given forth to you. Over the whole duration of GC Strategy's history with all federal contracts,
Hey, Bob, what's up?
we've actually approximately 21% is our gross margin for all 65 contracts we've had with the federal government.
D'accord.
I see. You also stated in October 2022, in response to a question where you were asked, as Mr. Sousa recently asked you a moment ago, whether it was elected representatives or officials that contacted you, and you said that it was officials who reached out to you, public servants. Was that also the case when it comes to the harassment application and ArriveCan? And was it also the case for the COVID Alert app, please? Could you tell me that?
So for COVID Alert, that was somebody from Canadian Digital Services reached out to me, understanding the work we have been doing previously on ArriveCan, and that was how the communication started. They were understanding what capacity we had for teams, what our teams were actually doing at ArriveCan, the types of categories and skill sets they had, and that was primarily for COVID Alert. Could you please repeat the other two?
En fait, les deux autres...
Well, the two others were to introduce certain measures during COVID. So you were also contacted by officials regarding the Butler AI harassment application and also ArriveCan app. Is that correct?
So yes, for the ArriveCan app, that was PSPC. That was a government official that reached out to us. But for the Butler, nobody actually reached out to us. That was just understanding that there was harassment charges that were heavily publicized in the public sector, public safety portfolio. And so that was when I reached out to Butler, understanding that there were several clients that could be in need of their services.
D'accord. Et concernant Butler et...
I see. And concerning Butler AI, what occurred is that you were put under a contract that was previously awarded to Dalian and Coradix, if I've understood correctly.
Correct. We were advised by CBSA to work with Dalian and Coradix.
Et ce contrat était réservé à...
And that contract was set aside and awarded to an Indigenous company. At that point, did you get the sense that Dalian was using that as a cover, if you will, in a sense, when it came to statistics regarding contracts awarded to Indigenous persons? You're not Indigenous, from what I can understand, and Butler is not an Indigenous company or individual either, is it?
I'm sorry, I'm not the expert to answer that question. I'm not familiar with the Indigenous procurement process. I couldn't give comment on that. I'm sorry.
Merci.
Thank you.
Hey, Harry, what's up?
Now, I'd like to come back to COVID alert. You stated that it was a Canadian Digital Services official who reached out to you. Were there officials from Health Canada who also reached out to you, please?
During the COVID alert inception of the contract, it was just purely Canadian Digital Services resources.
D'accord. Merci beaucoup.
I see. Thank you very much. I have about 30 seconds remaining. We received invoices, bank transfers from Dalian to GC Strategies. Now, I won't specify the amounts, if that's okay, but what I did observe was a transfer for Hudspeth CBSA. Now, I tried to locate the company. I found another family by the same name. Could you please tell me what or who Hudspeth CBSA is, please? In French, it's a different word, obviously, so that wouldn't make sense to you, perhaps.
Brief answer, Mr. Firth.
Hudspeth is a person. It's not a company. It's an individual.
Thank you very much. Mr. Backrack, please, for 6 minutes.
What do you guys think of Backrack?
Thank you very
I
much,
don't know.
Mr.
The
Chair.
NDP, I feel, is just a
Mr.
big
Firth,
letdown.
I think I'll start with some of your previous testimony before this committee. In your previous appearance, when you were asked about the ArriveCan situation and what it reveals about the government's contracting process, you said, I don't think it reveals
what's up?
anything. The reality is that it would have been a perfect execution
Dude, T,
if
how
the
are
4
you?
deliverables had been done on time and been of the standard CBSA would have approved and paid. This was not a contracting issue. So since then, we have the Auditor General's
Wanda de
scathing
Blonde, what's up?
report. We have the Office of the Procurement Ombudsman, another scathing report looking at the contracting and procurement process. Do you still stand by that view that this was not a contracting issue, given all the irregularities that have been very well documented?
Can you qualify exactly the previous testimony? Because that doesn't seem like something that resonated with what I said. I don't think I blame the contracting for the ArriveCan. I think I explained the contracting, saying there were 3 sole source national security exemptions.
Okay, well, you said this was not a contracting issue.
But I'm
Insider,
not sure what
what's
the
up?
context. That seems like it's out of context. If you could kindly give me the information prior to that.
I think the question was about what the ArriveCan situation reveals about the government's contracting process. That's what you were asked about. And you said that you didn't think it revealed anything, that you felt like the problem was not a contracting issue, it was a performance issue. And I guess
PSPC did follow all procurement processes in issuing those contracts for COVID pandemic response, or one of which being the ArriveCan app.
Okay, so despite all of the findings that have been brought forth by the ombudsperson and the Auditor General, you still feel like this was a performance issue and not a contracting issue. But I'll move on. I think, Mr. Firth, you've portrayed the services that your company provides as one of IT recruitment, essentially assembling teams of IT professionals for the government. And yet there's evidence that actually what was happening was the opposite, that the government was finding IT professionals that could provide services and then directing them to work with you. Is that what has happened in the past, specifically with Mr. McDonald and other firms?
No, I think you're referring to one specific component where the firm approached CBSA, and shortly thereafter, those names appeared on one of our contracts.
Mm-hmm.
That was, part of the government they have a process. They have a problem. They have to find a solution. And they either have to go to an RFP, which sometimes takes 3 to 6 months, or they look to use an existing vehicle. I can assume that maybe the opportunity was time sensitive, and using procurement processes, 3 to 6 months would have taken too long. They'd have asked them to come to myself or any other existing contract to try and get the work done sooner.
I guess the hard thing for me to understand is how the public gets value out of this, because essentially the government has identified a contractor that can do the work for them, but instead of simply setting up a contract with that company, they're suggesting that they work through your firm, which takes a commission, and so the actual contract ends up costing the Canadian taxpayer more than it would have if they had dealt with them individually. Is that a cost? That's a fair characterization.
That's a fair characterization. And again, until the processes which have been in place since 2003 change, where the government can be a little more nimble and execute on directed contracts quicker, it's going to continue to happen. It's very frequent and commonplace where if an RFP if there is a solution that's needed quickly, then it's always the point of least resistance is to use an existing contract
Leslie, what's up?
versus doing a new RFP.
So there's a situation set up whereby you have this existing contract that's somewhat nebulous and can act as a container for a wide variety of services that the government goes out and identifies and then funnels them through your existing contracting framework. And then you take a commission off the top of that. And
that would not be my contracts, because my contracts were very specific to pandemic response. So you couldn't have just used that as a generalized bucket. Those are the large contracts you hear, which are called omnibuses, which have 30 or 40 different categories on place. And those ones would be the catch-alls for the majority of the projects that go on within a department. Ours are very, very specific. Like, you have to always make sure that the requirement you're bringing up is in alignment with the original statement of work that came with those contracts. So if it falls outside of those parameters, I think Mr. McDonald kind of gave testimony to this, they're managers who often don't get funding or need funding for projects would put an ArriveCan twist to it, or they'd put a pandemic twist to what they were doing. This is why, again, the Auditor General's report is inaccurate, because as she attested to in her report, there's actually, you can't get a true cost for ArriveCan because there could be other projects or other resources associated that cost. Does that make sense?
Isn't that a problem, though, if the government auditor can't trace the money to establish whether the Canadian taxpayer got value for that money, and there's no transparency on which projects are actually being paid for under different contracts? Isn't that a problem? Like, it seems like that's one of the core problems that the Auditor General has highlighted in her report.
Yes, that is a problem.
Okay. How many projects have you worked directly with Mr. McDonald on over the years?
I have had three contracts with the COVID pandemic response contracts.
And how long have you known him? I think this was the subject of previous testimony, but just to refresh our memory.
I think around 2010 was when we first met.
And you've had 3 contracts since that time?
Yep.
How many times has Corridix and Dalian been a subcontractor on your contracts, or have you subcontracted to them?
They have never subcontracted through my contracts. And I think through Dalian and Corridix, it'll be a handful of times. I don't have the exact number.
Fewer than 10? More than 5?
Fewer than 10. More than 5.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. We now have Mrs. Block for 5, please.
Hey, Calla
Thank you very
Maroon,
much, Mr.
your
Chair.
mother
And I'm
ate
going
paste?
to circle back to some of the questions that my colleague was asking in regards to who from the government would have contacted you for these contracts. And I know you provided us with a name for a contract, and you stated that it was Angela Durrigan from PSPC who had signed off on an email. I think that was in regards to the first contract that you had received. But in fact, you received 4 contracts for ArriveCan, 3 which were non-competitive and 1 that was supposed to be competitive. So I'm going to ask if you could provide us with the names of those contacts on those contracts.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for the question, but they were never ArriveCan contracts. They were all pandemic response contracts, and ArriveCan was not solely used on just one contract alone. It was used across 2 of them. So they're pandemic response ones as opposed to 4 ArriveCan contracts.
Okay, well, I do understand that the national security exemption was put in place during the pandemic. And so can you provide us with the names of the contacts from the government when you were awarded the 4 contracts?
So Angela Durgan was 3 of them. And I don't have the lady's full name for the 4th one, but I'm more than happy to share that with you after this.
I would appreciate that because
Hey, Todd,
this
what's up?
information was requested from you last October, and you promised to undertake to provide those names for us, and you didn't. So I'm a little bit leery about that.
No, I did provide those names as part of our evidence package. I gave all 3 emails.
Hey, Sheila,
There were the
what's up?
contract awards, and all 3 of them showed Angela Durgan. The reason why the 4th one wasn't provided because that was only asked for the COVID contracts, not for the 4th one.
Okay, so we're going
that
to make
information was provided.
So we're going to make a distinction in regards to your contracts as to whether it was the pandemic, COVID, or ArriveCan. I got that. So you will
National
provide.
security exemption.
Yes, national security exemption, absolutely. So you have agreed to provide us with the name of the other individual that you were in contact with.
Yes, I will.
Thank you very much. The Auditor General, and I understand that you've testified here today that in her report she didn't provide accurate information, but she found that GC Strategies was involved in the development of a contract from the Government of Canada to your firm, valued at $25 million, that you received in May of 2022. Who did you communicate with from the Government of Canada while you were helping to create that criteria?
So first of all, the committee has subpoenaed me here to speak on behalf of things that I can talk about. Also, my understanding is these allegations have been moved to the RCMP, and in fear of interfering with the RCMP investigation, I don't think I can comment on that right now.
So the RCMP didn't comment.
So it's my understanding from testimony just a few minutes ago that you have been contacted by the RCMP. You're not under investigation right now, but you know what the RCMP is investigating?
I have the same information everybody else. I have what I'm watching on testimony. I'm seeing what committee members are putting on Twitter. So I'm assuming all of the PSBC's testimony said all the findings from the Auditor General's report has been sent through there. So again, with that being a broad stroke and with actually not getting disclosure like we asked for prior to being here, understanding what those documents and that information was, I cannot comment right now on that information.
You're not going to let us know who it was you were meeting with as you were constructing a contract that you knew you would end up getting?
Yeah, that's your words, not mine. I'm just saying right now, as a result of this being pushed to RCMP, with all efforts of the committee behind it, unfortunately, I cannot comment on an ongoing RCMP investigation.
Okay, well, I guess what I would ask is this commonplace? We'll get away from the actual contract in question, but is this commonplace for IT firms, for consulting firms to sit at the table and help determine the criteria for a contract that they are going to actually be bidding on?
Yeah, I'm not sure
Maura, what's up?
if I can comment on that. I can't comment on what everybody. I don't do that personally. I can't comment on what every other of the 635 other firms do.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
The witness is refusing to answer questions under the auspices of a hypothetical, according to him, and he is required to answer the questions put to him by this committee, unless I'm mistaken. And if I am mistaken, I just ask for you to correct my understanding. But the witness is required to provide this information, and his lawyer would be able to tell him that it wouldn't prejudice a police investigation.
It's a fair point. We do require witnesses to answer questions. Actually, from looking at the item from swearing in witnesses refuses. Okay. Refusal to answer questions, a failure to reply truthfully may give rise to a charge of contempt in the House. We will get to the next intervention, which is Ms. Atwin, and then we will have a chance with Mr. Deltel, but we will be having a break after the next round that perhaps Mr. Firth can confer with his lawyer and we can get back to this issue.
Hey, Wandy, what's up?
Ms. Atwin, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Firth, for being here. I'm gonna kind of bounce all over the place, so forgive me. But I'd like to start with there was a question around Cordell, and I just need a bit of clarification. So, in relation to Cordell, you stated that you bought the company in 2015, and who did you buy it from?
Chris Jurowitz, I think, was the gentleman who owned the company.
Oh,
Okay,
FYNM.
because
Thank you
according
so
to my
much.
notes, I had
Oh my
that
goodness.
Mr. Anthony and yourself, as well as Mr. White, were all listed as
This is crazy.
on the corporate info website. So was this company not registered prior to 2015?
It was operating doing other government contracts, but myself, Mr. Anthony, our other business partner, when we were a 3-person team, we were the ones that purchased it in 2015. And then we subsequently after that, we applied to CRA and you applied to PSBC to do an official name change so we can put our own brand to it.
Okay. And you also
Hey,
mentioned
Richard,
that
what's
you've
up?
been,
How's things
working
in
within
Yarmouth?
contracting with the federal government since 2007. And would that be under your name as an individual or another company's name? Or if we were to search that information, what would we be searching?
I used to work for a company called Veritech, which has recently been purchased by, well, not recently, but it's been purchased by Express Manpower. I was solely with those guys since 2007 until 2015.
And it was all IT related work with the government?
That's exactly what we're doing right now. Yep.
Okay. So I did want to address, I mean, in your opening comments, you mentioned
Eyebrows,
some of the ways
guys.
this is impacting you personally, as well as your family and your children. And there's certainly, that should never happen. And I apologize for what's happening, as far as your personal life. And I'm not surprised, sadly, because of the rhetoric that's been used around this issue. We hear a lot of it in the House as well. And even as Liberal members of this committee, a lot of it's actually directed at us as well. So I'd really like to clear up some of the things that we're hearing. Things like, Liberal insiders got rich. So I'd like to ask you, do you have any personal connections to the Prime Minister, to our cabinet ministers, to any of us as Liberal members of this committee?
No, I do not.
Okay. The other big thing is the way it's characterized is that, GC Strategies was a 2-man operation in a basement that basically had, according to the Auditor General, $19 million. Essentially, it seems that it's being portrayed like, cash was dumped on your lap in this amount of money.
Hey, Perry, what's up?
And so really that money flows through your contractors, your subcontractors, and you mentioned the amount that you would have received personally. But I do have a question about the commission piece. So it's cited often as 15 to 30% commission. Can you account for this fluctuation? Is that a common thing?
Yeah, so it all depends on, it can be, I'll dumb it down and make it as boring as possible. How it typically works is you get a agreed rate to the client, let's say $1,500 a day for your services. It's then on us, once that contract's been awarded, to try and find that resource. And at that point, you negotiate their rate. So if their rate's $1,000, you've now made 25%. If their rate is $1,200, you've now made X percent. So it all depends on what negotiations are between what the rate is to the Crown, and what the person you've found is. That delta in between is the margin.
Okay, great. That's very helpful.
Was it
So
very
you have addressed a little bit about the Auditor General's report, and it was good to know that you had been approached for comment around some of the numbers that she was sharing. Were you approached by the procurement ombud prior to him writing his report?
No, I was not.
Okay, and do you feel that your input with the Auditor General was reflected?
No, we commented on 2 parts, and they were not included, or really our thoughts were considered. This is why one of the biggest ones was the $19.1 million, because you'd understand what the uproar is going to be and how it's going to be used against you when you've been citing, like CBSA officials have been citing, that the number's closer to 12 million. And again, there's lots of reasons why there could be discrepancies. I mean, we understand the financial systems and the codes aren't the best at CBSA. Furthermore, is the approximation and the valuation that was provided in the AG report was billing up until May 2023, whereas we previously gave numbers from the application build, which finished in July of 2022. So there's another year's worth of billing there, which may not have even been ArriveCan. But again, no one knows if it's ArriveCan or not because how things are tagged internally.
Okay. And to the extent you are aware, can you describe how the government may have tracked your performance on ArriveCan contracts?
There's quarterly reviews, quarterly reports we have to send in the PSPC, which shows burn rates, which essentially means how much the resource is burning. Let's say a task authorization starts at $200,000. Each month you have to say how much that resource has used up against that. So not really from a performance. That's more done, like I said, performance is done by an employee, but we track the finances typically with PSPC to understand, is a task authorization running out? Is a contract running out? Is there time to do renewals? So that's the extent of how we're monitored from the government organization. Everything else like project management, budget, and everything is taken care of by them.
Thank you very much. That is our time, I'm afraid. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Firth,
slow pitches to
earlier,
that guy.
when we were talking about COVID alert, you stated that a government official reached out to you from Shared Services, Digital Services, Canada, who had heard about you. Did that government official tell you who referred him or her to you?
No, he did not. It was more a case of we understand the work you're doing on ArriveCan, and that's kind of how the introduction started.
OK. Parce que...
I see. Basically, COVID alert was being supervised by PHAC, the Public Health Agency of Canada, someone you know well and someone you had dealings with regarding COVID alert was transferred to that department, who won a position in a competition, and that is why I asked the question about the referral. Thank you very much. Now, you also stated that the mistakes on the part of the Auditor General may have been due to the codes that CBSA uses that are not always so clear. In your opinion, when it comes to procurement and contracting, do they need to tidy up their house at the CBSA in order to clarify what those codes are, such that the transparent government, quote unquote, is truly transparent, and such that data is much more clear in the eyes of the public and also for the politicians sitting around this table?
Yes, I agree. They need to do that.
Donc,
therefore, you have no particular input on this topic, even though you received, and you stated this yourself, well, you had to deal with the adverse effects and ramifications due to the fact that the codes are not clear enough, as you stated yourself.
Yeah, so I don't have access to the codes. All I have access to is the reporting and the numbers that are completely contradictory to what I have. Again, I have the luxury of speaking to every one of the 100 consultants we put through during the pandemic to get a true understanding of their level of effort for what they were working on and what they were doing. So if you're coming in as an Auditor General, you would not have access to the detail that I currently have, but you'd have access to calculating task authorizations. And the truth being there as well, that not all task authorizations are fully utilized. So you may see one for $200,000, but only 120 was actually used on that task authorization. So this is, again, where these inflated numbers can come from, because there's just not the financial system in place that can do real-time health checks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Backrack, go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2019, and this is pre-COVID. This, I believe, was in reference to a chatbot product that Bottler had developed. And there's some communication between Mr. McDonald and yourself. And I'll go back to your previous comments from the last round where you said that the reason that the government might direct contractors to work through your standing contract with the government is because it's faster and more efficient than going through a procurement process, which could take several months. That's a fair characterization. I see you sort of nodding. Is that fair, Mr. Firth?
Yeah, not just mine or any existing contract.
So here's a communique from Mr. McDonald, November 18th, 2019. And this is an email to you. And he says, look, Kristian, I can't solicit this as a government department. And I know, I think there's an opportunity for you, GC Strategies, to partner with these guys. He means Bottler. And knowing what you can do in this town, I think you can turn this into an enterprise product. What did Mr. McDonald mean by, I can't solicit this as a government department? It sounds like it doesn't have to do with efficiency. It sounds like it has to do with working around some kind of rules that are in place to prevent him from going out there and handpicking contractors.
Thank you for the question. And the truth is, I can't comment on what Mr. McDonald was writing or why he was writing those things. I'm sorry, at that point, I was not writing on behalf of Mr. McDonald, so I can't attest to what he meant by that.
Like, I guess what it looks like to someone from on the outside is it looks like Mr. McDonald is doing your bidding and trying to set you up for turning this into an enterprise product. I assume because you would be able to charge a substantial commission if the product that Bottler had developed became an enterprise product. Like, do you agree that this is a wholly inappropriate role for someone high up in CBSA to be playing?
Then I can't speculate on what the intentions were with that email. I mean, everybody can interpret it how they want. I just can't speculate, and I don't really know the intent behind that email.
I find that difficult to believe, Mr. Firth. Like, if you look,
it's the truth. Like, I was not in Mr. McDonald's brain when he was writing that. I can't make assumptions on what the intentions were for that email.
I wasn't in his head.
Thanks. That is our time. Yeah, that is our time.
I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Deltel, please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr.
this is
Chairperson.
exciting.
Now,
Okay,
obviously,
hopefully we will
we
see
want to
that.
get
Has
to the
anybody
bottom
seen
of
him in
what
the
is
room
the worst financial scandal of the history of the government of Canada. This is a contract that was supposed to start at about $80,000, ended up in an orgy of spending of over $60 million, which is over 750 times more expensive than what was expected. This is not right. Canadians need to understand why there was this boondoggle that they're still paying for to date. We know that GC Strategies was threatened with arrest regarding testifying here, which attests the fact that there was no confidence in the fact that you may have refused to testify before this committee, but I'm afraid you have under the obligation to do so. Mr. Chairperson, this is not the first time that Mr. Firth is testifying. There were two previous testimonies.
It wasn't me.
First, regarding the
got no
testimony,
money.
your previous testimony,
Show
did
you.
you lie, yes or no, in your previous evidence?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please? I was at some feedback on my microphone.
Avez-vous menti?
Did you lie in your two previous appearances before this committee, yes or no?
Well,
For two,
Correct
me? I
question.
made a mistake with a cottage and a chalet last time I was here.
Okay.
And again, it's not a lie. I mean, the actual irony is that it was referred to as a cabin.
Et puis l'hospitalité avec le whisky sur vos...
And what of the whiskey and the hospitality involved?
Yeah, I mean, there's been previous testimony where there was whiskey tasting, and I think it was mentioned that that was put out to government officials, and it was also put out to contractors, and those government officials have since said that they got permission from their superiors and paid their way.
Prenons maintenant le contrat tel qu'il...
Now, the contract as it was awarded, it's the contract that you executed. At what point did you realize that $80,000 was insufficient and that things were starting to cost a lot? At $1 million, $2 million, $3 million? At what point did you clue into the fact that this was going to go through the roof and it was going to become exceedingly expensive?
So again, thank you for the question. Like that, that's not my determination. The first contract award was for $2.35 million. That was the one that was the first COVID contract. Subsequently, there were amendments that were made. You have to bear in mind, I think testimony mentioned that national security exemptions only were to last for 3 months. So there had to be a decision made by the government to either put a larger number and keep doing amendments versus keep going back and retendering and redo it, which isn't a fast process, we know that, to retender and restructure a contract every 3 months. My understanding was it did jump, the one contract we're talking about, that went from 2.35 and it went to 13.9. But my understanding was every time there was an amendment, it was published on Buy and Sell, which has 635 other companies can challenge. And it was also put in front of the House, and MPs voted in the House every single time there was an amendment. So it wasn't like I knew, but everybody knew that the prices were raising.
Qui s'assurait de la...
Who monitored the quality of the work that you were doing? Overnight, you can't just go from $80,000 to $60 million without someone sounding the alarm bells and saying something is awry. Who monitored the quality of your work?
We'd had 4 or 5 government officials that was monitoring the quality of our work. Well, we were not, there were other prices associated to just ArriveCan and the application bill that we're not privy to. So we were not part of the 19.1 or the 11 million to the 60. We were from the 0 to the 11 or 19.1, depending on which article you want to read.
On comprend là, que quand arrive la COVID, il y a des...
Now, when COVID struck, of course, there were going to be exceptions. Everyone understands that. But there's a distinction to be made between being very active and inflating the bill to the tune of 700 times larger exponentially. That's what Canadians wanted to get to the bottom of. When did you realise that this was a phenomenal cost overrun and yet it was lacking in quality? At what point, please?
Well, first of all, we've submitted over 1,500 invoices monthly. So again, I want to get the illusion of everybody's thinking right now, we were never given a check for $20 million on day one. We've done 1,500 monthly approved submitted invoices for the last 3 years to get to whatever amount you want to listen to, 19.1 or 11. We were not responsible for alerting any alarm bells. We were performing, we hit 171 releases of the application on time. Every time Public Health Agency changed the policy, we'd have to amend the application, and that there in itself, the fact we were hitting all of our targets meant that we were doing a good job, but we also don't control what the budget is. That's out of our realm.
Vous faisiez, ouais, je prends votre propos.
Our time. Mr. Jouari, go ahead, please.
Del Tell is great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Always
and
French, but
Mr.
that's all
Firth,
right.
I'd like to
Sure.
focus on 3
This guy is
areas,
full
and
of
I
it,
only
though.
have 5 minutes. Number
news.
one, in your
Ready for
testimony,
some
you referred
softball
to
questions.
3 companies. One, Vertec, and I would ask you to give us the proper spelling of that, which you were an employee between 2007
Proper
to 2015. Then I understood that there was a company named Clorox, which there had 3 partners, and then in 2015, 2 of you bought this company, which then applied for a name change and CRA, et cetera. It became GC Strategy. So are you telling me, or is my understanding of the fact that you were employee at Vertec and you also had a company, were part of a 3-man show during that period?
No, from 2007 till March 2015, I was an employee of Veritech, which is VERITAAQ. I was there for 8 years.
Okay.
Then myself and my 2 business partners, we approached a company called TORIES, who had previously been working independently from us. And when we purchased them in April and subsequently did the name changes and everything else to rebrand.
Okay. So in your due diligence, in buying that company, did you look into any type of connection that they had with the government and or any contracts that they had worked in the past and projected contracts that they had in the future?
So we went back 5 years and so we saw the contracts they previously had with PSPC. And then I think when we purchased them, they only had 1 contract outstanding with Natural Resources Canada.
Are you in a position to tell us how much you bought it and how much of that was goodwill?
I can't. I don't think I can disclose that right now.
Okay. We'll leave it.
You can't answer the softball
Is
questions?
that now coming to your
Lord,
again
bud.
opening remarks, second area, you have consistently said the application build,
Unbelievable.
and you've emphasized this on the build, where we know that the Auditor General has said this total application build and support and all of those things, it can be estimated around 60 million. We don't know that number is right or not, but and you are telling us that it's your part of ArriveCan build was $11 million. Can you clarify the difference when you specifically were to use ArriveCan build, GC strategy, and the big picture of what has mushroomed into, or potentially has mushroomed into about $60 million?
Yeah, there again, we were only servicing the build. So when you look at call centers, I think Service Canada had $7 or $8 million for a call center. There was cloud services with AWS and Microsoft. There was other components like cybersecurity. There was data management. There was, I think there was a component for character recognition. There were things that we weren't involved in. We had a core team that was responsible for developing the app on the web, Android and iOS.
Okay,
anything
perfect.
And no back-end components.
So you're in a position of those invoices. You haven't been asked to provide those invoices. Good of you that you've gone through and you've got understanding. And you are claiming that it was roughly about $1 million, and you're saying net, you have shown a net income of $2.5 million off of that 11. Am I right?
Approximately $2.5 million.
Yeah. Okay. So with about 1 minute and 10 seconds, I'd like to go back to another comment that you made, and that's the third area. You talked about the rate to the crown. Okay. And the rate to the crown, how is that rate determined? Is it determined by you, or is it determined by the crown?
It's a combination. So when you submit the RFP, if there's multiple options, then there will be what they call a median band, where they'll take all of the bids and they'll understand what the median price out between $1,500 to $1,200. Then it'll be around $1,350 is what they'll say is the fair price for the crown. That's what they've determined it to be.
Okay, so crown determines the crown rate based on a methodology, correct? Now,
correct.
When you go and bid, you bid on that crown rate. It's not that you set the crown rate or any of the 636 sets the crown rate, correct?
It's off market rate. Okay, so what that means is this is essentially why I guess this process was put in place in 2003 to the private sector, is to be competitive and keep the prices down for the crown. You need to have 636 people bidding on something every time.
Fair enough. So the rate is set up by the crown based on a market rate. And then you will basically go back and try to negotiate with resources. And whatever margin is left is yours. It's not that you are increasing the crown rate, established rate, correct?
Yeah. Once the rate is determined, the crown, it's up to us to negotiate the resource. And
Okay, I will come back to you again on that because I'm out of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jouari. It's 12:06. We will suspend for 10 minutes and start round 3 at 12:16 on the dot. We're suspended.
Oh, well, they're suspended. But we're not going anywhere, guys. We're going to hang right here. And so we started about 2 minutes after they started. So I don't know how long the break was going to be. But we're going to find out. So they're still on break. While they're on break, what would you guys like to do? We can watch a quick video, or did anybody catch how long that break is supposed to be? Because that's the part I missed. Were they breaking for 15? Because we can do something else. Here, we're going to try this. No, that's not a good idea. Here we go. Sorry, gang. It's just a bit of a quick pause. I am trying to figure out what we're going to do next while we wait. There, that's what we can do. That is a good idea. We're going to watch a little bit of Outburst. There's streeters that CPAC does. I find they're pretty good. I've got to learn to prepare a bit better. Like, so doing some of these lives, like I really was only doing the question periods before, and they're pretty smooth. They're a beginning and an end. There's no breaks. Like, but with these committees, there are some breaks. Where is it? Okay. Sorry, gang. I know this is slow and painful, but we will get back on track.
To defense. But many countries are falling short, including Canada, who contributes roughly 1.38% of our GDP. So, what do you think about this? Our question. What do you think about Donald Trump's comments condoning Russian attacks on NATO allies who don't pay their share?
You can't have people who just mouth off like that, who are in international standing.
Lord. Sorry, gang. It's just not clicking.
Convicted, and I think Donald Trump should be in jail. What he is doing is absolutely 100% treasonous. As a Canadian, I think he's a dangerous political figure, and I don't think he should be given a mic anymore.
It's hard to know with him. He's so erratic. He spouts off things on the spur of the moment. So, I mean, maybe he believes that, but who knows?
I feel afraid for our country, for our freedom.
Why?
Well, because right now it may not be the best, but I mean, we still have freedom. We're able to walk around and yeah, so just scary to know that we could be attacked.
Does my face say enough? I think he needs a little more information before making sweeping statements like that. You know, maybe we're not spending what we're supposed to on defense. Maybe we need to get better at that, but we're part of NATO and we work together.
Well, I kind of like Trump, you know. So sometimes you got to, you know, be tough and to get results, and that's the way I look at, you know, Trump and some of his decisions.
I think that those are, you know, our trusted neighbors in the United States, and it's really disheartening to hear their potential leader talking that way, which is almost directed towards us. So I think we probably need to do more on the defense front, but you'd never talk to a trusted neighbor that way. So I think that's it's really scary for what's to come if Donald Trump regains power in the United States. Definitely.
He is no longer sitting president, so I mean his views on any sort of, you know, foreign anything that goes on in the United States government. It has nothing to do with him anymore. He's just a mouthpiece, as far as I'm concerned.
I think his way of doing things is to go a little bit overboard, but it still stands that most of these NATO allies are not paying for their own protection, and Russia has shone a light on that. So I think the criticism should be taken to heart, and especially Canada. There's a recent article about we are not up to defending ourselves, not in the old wars, never mind the new wars.
Well, I'm dual. I'm Canadian and American, and let's just say I register to vote every year, and the last two elections I made sure I did not vote for Trump. Anything he says, I don't even pay attention to. In fact, I try to avoid him on sound bites and news, and he's attention seeking, but yet he's a dangerous man.
I think it's ridiculous. While it's important to pay your fair share, and it is important to contribute to NATO, it is a very strong.
We will get back on track here right away. Sorry, I know. This is tough.
Disputing the fact that $9 million wasn't invoiced.
All
right. And we are coming right back.
Mr. Genuis for 5 minutes, please.
All right.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Firth, this is a sad example of corruption and potential criminality, but it also exposes incredible waste within this government, especially in the area of procurement and contracts to well-connected consultants for, in many cases, no discernible work. So I want to try, in my round of questions, to follow the money that was spent. The Auditor General's report estimates $59.5 million spent on the app, and further that your company received directly $19.1 million of that money, even though by your own admission, all that you did was recruitment of other individuals and companies. That's an incredible sum for quote-unquote recruitment. But you told the committee that the Auditor General's information is not correct. You dispute the $19.1 million figure. You say it was only $11 million. Is that correct?
The application build, that's correct.
Okay, so what happened to the missing $8.1 million? What do you think accounts for the discrepancy?
Helena, what's up?
Well, so you'll see in my evidence package, we've actually invoiced CBSA in 3 years, close to $22 million, approximately. I'm not disputing the fact that $19 million wasn't invoiced through my company monthly. I'm disputing that $19.1 million is completely attributed towards the ArriveCan application build.
Okay, so your testimony is that you've received $22 million from CBSA over the same period. You simply are disputing the categorization of it as being all related to ArriveCan. What I would add to this in terms of frankly the absurdity is that the invoices that you've submitted to this committee, some of which are very kind of vague and unclear in terms of what they actually refer to, but they add up to $9.6 million. So you've shown this committee invoices for $9.6 million. You've also said you got $11 million that you categorize as related to ArriveCan, and $22 million in total. So how do you explain the discrepancy between what you've shown us invoices for and what you said was you actually received?
So first of all, the $22 million is not just solely ArriveCan. There was multiple projects we were working on during the pandemic. These were not ArriveCan contracts, right? There were 3 pandemic.
The Auditor General says they are, but I was asking specifically about the difference between the $9.6 million and the $11 million. You said you got $11 million, but you didn't provide us with $11 million worth of invoices.
We send hundreds of pages of documents over. I can follow up and make sure that those ones would result to $11 million.
Yeah,
I've done this again.
Hundreds of
pages doesn't absolve you of the need to provide accurate information, sir. And just in terms of the difference between the 19.1 and the 11 million, you started off your testimony by saying that everybody's lying and saying mean things about you. The media is wrong. The MPs are wrong. But you're also now saying the Auditor General's wrong. What are we as a committee to make of the fact that you want us to believe that everybody is wrong in their figures except you, and yet the invoices you've sent to the committee don't add up to the figure you said was spent was given to you in relation to ArriveCan?
Yeah, I also said as well, it's in my opening statement that it's this testimony and this committee that have also had death threats against myself and my wife, which have had photographs of my kids being taken.
Sir, I'm looking for accurate information on the amount of taxpayers' money that went to your company. Now,
we've invoiced 1,500 times, $22 million.
Well, the invoices do not line up with the figures that you've given. Sir, I'd like to know, for all the money that you earned on this project, after expenses, what was the total amount of money that you and your partner took home from this project?
I haven't got the exact numbers after taxes, after expenses, through dividends, but I've told you it's approximately $2.5 million.
Each?
Approximately 2.5. No, in total.
Okay.
That's the 20%.
So you and your partner became millionaires through this project, and you want us to believe that all of the rest of it, in addition to the 2.8 million, were expenses, even though all you did is recruit. I mean, how expensive is a LinkedIn account these days?
Well, $2.5 million over 2 years is 1.25 divided by 2 people.
How many hours? How many hours did you spend working on sending the LinkedIn invitation, sir?
That has no bearing on this project, does it?
I think it does. How much you earn for what work is the question we're asking, right? And the numbers don't line up. And
just a quick question and a quick answer, please.
Yeah, how many hours did you spend working on this project in exchange for the millions of dollars that you and your partner got for the act of recruiting?
Would have been between 30 to 40 hours every month with the invoicing, with doing timesheets, with doing accounting, with doing paying our resources.
So what makes you so lucky that you got this opportunity?
Mr. Genwis, thanks very much. Mr. Baines, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Firth, for joining us today.
Baines is awful.
I think I'd like to get
frustrated. He'll make you frustrated.
The bottom of the process.
Full of it.
And I think Canadians, still are trying to understand how this process works and how do contracts get awarded. And I mean, elected officials come and go. You've been working with government, through the bureaucracy, with public service officials since 2007. Can you maybe take us back to your first time working with government, and what were the processes then, and did they change over time? How did you and your colleagues, your partners, navigate through any changes, if there have been changes through those processes? Did you build relationships over those times? Did our bureaucracy and because ultimately we have public service officials that work for decades and in different departments, hundreds of departments. So how did they get comfortable seeing you? Did they overlook certain processes? That we're trying to get to the bottom, and I think of how contracts are being given out. And in this case, you've received hundreds of contracts since 2007 in your time working with government. And so maybe walk us through your time during 2007 and maybe try to answer some of those questions along the way.
Okay, thank you. So fundamentally the government has a problem. They've identified they need to change the technology, they need a team of people to come in, or that there's just something they need to get done. At that point, they determine they need to put an RFP in place. So they'll work together on putting requirements together. They'll put everything they need, a statement of work, and so forth. At that point, it goes on to a public tender, onto a buy and sell, and there are companies who are invited. At that point, you then just decide whether you're going to bid on the opportunity or you're not. If you are, you then look at the requirements, you then go find the people, you then make sure that they are security cleared, and they're going to be the ones who are actually going to be the ones doing the work, should you win the contract. If you're successful, at that point, there's task authorizations that go against that contract, which is for individual pieces of work that go against that contract. A task authorization typically has a small statement of work. It will have its tasks, it will have its deliverables, and the number of resources and types of resources that it wants. At that point, you would then respond to task authorizations. Bear in mind, it is one business at that point because you already have the contract. You would then submit the task authorizations that go through due process, that be evaluated by the department, and that's how you typically would get one or a number of resources in to do the work.
So this is 2007, exact same process?
Same process.
It hasn't changed?
Has not changed.
So is there a failure in with our officials going through the correct processes? So you over time ultimately became someone who's mastered the process of how to get these contracts? Is that maybe, or is it just you know how to follow those guidelines? If you look at some of the issues that have arisen here, and you're saying that this is the process where recruitment is the norm, and you're bringing on people to complete these tasks, this process hasn't changed since 2007. That's
correct. And saying we're lucky to be, what makes us so lucky is it's just we've just determined to be a two-person company that's figured out how to do what 10 people do, or 20 people do, or 30 people. Everybody has the same tasks if you're an owner or an employee of an IT staffing firm. You just have to follow the process that's been put out by PSPC. It's kind of black and white.
It's black and white.
Okay, and then fast forward to your time.
Just clever.
So how many people did you actually end up recruiting for the ArriveCan job?
ArriveCan would have been around 35 to 40 people in different capacities. But for CBSA proper, for the whole 3 years we were working there, over 100.
And so for the 35 people, each of them would have to go through a verification process?
Yep. Again, and please be clear that the government cannot go direct to these resources. They need vendors like ourselves to pass these people through.
Why is that not part of the process?
Just quick
because
answer,
you have
because
to
we're
be a
past our
qualified
time. So just start again,
You have to be a qualified vendor.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Mr. Baines. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 2.5.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Firth, I'll just make a number of assertions, and I'd like you to confirm them or deny them. Now, if I understood correctly, GC Strategies was never responsible for the financial coding. It's the contract authority, i.e. CBSA, that was responsible for financial coding that was required under the Auditor General's analysis. Is that correct?
That's what the Auditor General's report says. I thought it'd be somebody in the financial department would be.
Thank you. Now, your sole responsibility as a company was to affix the contract number on your invoices. Is that correct?
Typically, contract numbers, task authorization numbers, confirmation and sign off by the government.
The Auditor General stressed that CBSA was not doing its financial coding adequately, and as a result, a complete verification had to be done manually by comparing each and every document and each invoice. Do you believe that with a manual verification of that sort, that the data can be corrected, whether it has to do with your company or any company whatsoever?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again? I want to make sure it could be the right answer.
Do you believe that once a manual verification of the financial coding will be conducted by the Auditor General, will that correct the data that was released a couple of weeks ago, both in your case and for other companies?
I'd have to ask what the manual verification would entail, and that all the information that they're verifying manually is actually all the information.
OK, merci. Saviez-vous que le processus...
Were you aware that the procurement process used currently was implemented by the Minister of Public Works and Government Services at the time, Ms. Ambrose?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I don't know the answer.
OK. On va y aller avec une question.
Well, perhaps a more straightforward question. Do you find the procurement process to be straightforward, flexible, resilient, or cumbersome, complicated, complex, and needing to be improved?
I find it, after being in the industry for a long time, straightforward. However, I do think there needs to be a component where it's quicker for the government to go direct to the source.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bachrach, please go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Now, I think it's pretty clear, looking at the relationship between you, Mr. Firth, and Mr. McDonald, I think it's pretty clear from your testimony what's in it for you, which is that you've established yourself as the government's go-to guy, that you have the ability to run these contracts through your company, and Mr. McDonald therefore funnels a bunch of work to you, and you're able to charge these commissions. That's been well established. What I've had a harder time understanding is what's in it for Mr. McDonald. And I'm going to go back to some Globe and Mail reporting from January 16th, and this involves communications between you and the two Bottler principals. And you urged them to single out Mr. McDonald for praise when meeting with other senior government officials. And the quote here from you, Mr. Firth, is, "I just want to make sure that he gets taken care of," right? This was told to Ms. Dutt and Mr. Morv. And I'm just wondering if you can clarify what him being taken care of would entail, and why it was so important that Mr. McDonald got taken care of, in your view.
So this was no financial benefit at all, or any kind of transaction before. I just felt that the opportunity that Mr. McDonald working with Bottler and understanding the importance of the harassment that was happening within the public safety portfolio, that I felt like there had to be some recognition, whether it's a pat on the back or job well done for identifying the issues with the public safety and being the pathfinder organization to move forward.
So the benefit for him from this relationship was that praise sent his way would help him advance in the organization, and the benefit for you was that you would be able to charge these commissions and continue to get work. Is that a fair characterization of sort of this reciprocity that you had going on?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Well, because the intentions was, I was not going to rub his back, he rubs my back. This is not, I'm going to make you have advancements through your career so you can keep funneling contracts. You have to bear in mind.
Back's being rubbed.
The first contract, after knowing Mr. McDonald since 2010, the first contract I was awarded while he was in the department was 10 years later. Like, that doesn't sound like it's a relationship that's been going back and forth many times.
But the quote is literally, "I just want to make sure he gets taken care of," right?
That could be recognition for a job well done. That doesn't guarantee a promotion.
Okay, it reads to me like something more than recognition, being taken care of.
So a quick question, Mr. Bachrach, please.
Okay, I'll cede my time, Mr. Chair, and dive into the next question next round. Thank you.
Thanks. Mrs. Block, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Firth, I'm going to circle back to my line of questioning regarding GC Strategies' involvement in developing criterion on the fourth contract that you would have been awarded through the CBSA. Both the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombuds identified the overly restrictive criterion on that fourth contract, which obviously raised concerns for both of them. Of deeper concern to the Auditor General is that she went further and identified that GC Strategies were at the table. And so, look, you would have been meeting with public office holders in order to set this criteria. They are accountable to Parliament. And so I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked earlier. I'm trusting that you've had an opportunity to speak with your lawyer. Who did you communicate with from the Government of Canada? And I need the names. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So let me address the about the requirements being overly restrictive. I think I've heard in testimony and read in reports that the e-portal did a CPSS search, and there were actually 40 qualified vendors that could bid on this RFP. And actually, I think 10 even showed interest. So it seems a little subjective after the fact to call it restrictive when there were already 40 qualified vendors who could actually respond to that. And secondly, I've had a chance to speak with my lawyer, and I'm sticking to what my line of is with regards to this is under investigation by the RCMP, and therefore I cannot interfere with that.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if you could provide us with any clarity on that.
Thanks, Mrs. Block. Mr. Firth, I understand what you're saying, but it's a very direct and simple question, and we do have rules, and I'm going to refer back to it. Witnesses must answer all questions which the committee puts to them. You may object to a question asked by an individual committee member. However, the committee agrees that the question to be put to the witness is obliged to reply. Actions a witness refuses questions may be reported to the House, and I think I can speak for everyone. We don't want to get to that point, but I think it's a fair question, and I don't think it's one directly related to any potential investigation. If I read it right, it's the commentary that GC helped write the requirements that you in turn won the contract for. And I think that's what we're looking for. It is, if I correct Mrs. Block, is, you know, who did you discuss this with the department with?
Yeah, so again, I've the first three contracts, the names have already been provided back in October of 2022, and I promised the committee member that I'll get the fourth person to them after this meeting.
Okay.
So I want, just for greater clarity, I'm looking for the individuals or individual that you would have met with in developing the criteria, not who signed off on the contract in this particular case. I do want that name, but now I'm asking, who did you sit at the table with to develop the criteria for this contract?
And again, apologies, but after speaking with my lawyer, my stand still stands the same with the RCMP investigation pending. I don't interfere with that.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure where we go with that, but I'm sure we'll discuss that in due time. I'm going to then turn some of my questions to a slide deck for a possible app in March 2020 that you were asked to create. It's my understanding that this deck was presented to Min Doan, who is a key government official that was involved in ArriveCan, and that particular app had a Distill mobile logo. If that is correct, who asked you to provide the deck?
I'm sorry. Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. You were asked to put together a slide deck for a possible app in March of 2020. Who asked you to provide that deck?
I'm more than happy to get that to you in writing. I was not aware of this question coming up. So March 2020 at Distill that.
He wasn't aware.
I can get that to you.
Okay. So you were contacted from the government and you were told you are receiving a contract for ArriveCan. Is there anyone at the CBSA that would have to declare a conflict of interest on contracts that you are bidding on?
No, there's not.
Okay, so you are not related to anyone at the CBSA?
Correct, I'm not.
Okay. Are you related to anyone working for a government department or any public office holder?
All of my family is in the UK.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's turn now to Von Brennan. He is an Ottawa-based consultant, and it is my understanding that you know him professionally. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know him in any other capacity?
No, I do not.
Okay, Mr. Brennan's wife worked at Procurement Canada. That's the department responsible for government contracts. Were you aware of this?
Not until now.
Okay, just, I guess, another convenient coincidence. Who were your contacts with the government at the following departments and agencies? We have Canada Border Services Agency. It's my understanding there are 134 contracts there. Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, 24 contracts, and Employment and Social Development Canada. So who are your contacts with all of these departments?
I'd like to provide all of those details after this meeting, please. I would not like to speak about it publicly, just how this committee is going. So if you wouldn't mind, I would provide that information to you after this meeting.
We're out of time anyways. Perhaps we can get back to that in the next round, or it can be provided in writing. We have Mr. Kuzmierczuk from sunny tropical Windsor. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Firth, for your testimony here today. I wanted to ask you, you had stated that you were part of about 100+ contracts throughout your career with the federal government. Have any of those failed to deliver?
We've never had a contract cancel.
Okay. Have you ever failed to deliver what was asked of you in any contract by whether it's the contracting agency like CBSA or Procurement Services Canada?
No, I have not.
Okay. Going back to picking up a question that my colleague had just asked regarding the mandatory criteria, the Auditor General report and the Procurement Ombudsman basically concluded that this is a documentation issue. This is that we're looking at here. Those are the huge gaps that we saw. That there wasn't any paper trails. Auditor General called it some of the worst financial tracking that we've seen, and that's the conclusion of both of those independent agencies. But there's one issue that I want to sort of zero in on, because it is more serious than that, and that is the question about what was your role in drafting the mandatory criteria, because the argument from the Auditor General is that this had the potential to artificially reduce competition on the bidding process. And as a result, Canadians would not have received the best value. I know that there are some things you mentioned you aren't able to respond to right now in terms of who you were involved with directly, in terms of designing the criteria, the mandatory criteria that favored GC strategies. That was the words of the Ombudsman. But can you tell us how often in this line of work is a company like yours involved in designing the mandatory bid criteria?
Well, again, there's certain things I can disclose and I can't comment for all the other firms, 635, and what they do.
Just your firm, Mr. Firth.
Sorry, you have to repeat the question there. Right now, I'm confused with what you're asking me. I'm sorry.
So basically, the argument was that, or what the Auditor General and the Ombudsman had stated, is that you were participating in the design of the mandatory bid criteria. And the argument is that this would have favored GC strategies. And I wanted to ask, how often are you a participant? Do you participate in the design of mandatory bid criteria?
We never do.
because the Auditor General had stated and the Procurement Ombudsman that you were a participant in designing the bid criteria that may have favored GC strategies. So can you address that particular issue?
What I can say and what I'm prepared to say is that the e-portal system from PSPC identified through those mandatory criteria that there were still 40 qualified vendors that could go after this. That doesn't sound like it's overly restrictive if there's 40 vendors that can go after this.
But you could understand, Mr. Firth, we're concerned that a vendor is actually working with whether it's CBSA or whether it's Procurement Services Canada to design the bid itself. That seems like that's sort of inside baseball, and so I want you to address that charge, because that seems very serious to me, because it has the potential to reduce competition.
Well, what I can say is that there was no bid rigging involved at all in the fourth COVID contract.
Okay, one other question I wanted to ask you to clarify is my colleagues across the table often refer to GC strategies as two guys in a basement that do no work and that received $11 million in contracts. Can you clarify what is the role of a staffing agency and respond to that charge that it's two guys in a basement that do no work?
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's two guys in a staffing agency, but also two business owners. So there's also the amount of work is actually doubled composed to just being an employee. You know, we're doing security clearances, we're recruiting, we're meeting with partners, we're networking with independent subcontractors, understanding what they do. We're preparing RFPs, we're writing RFPs, we're working with all these people to contribute and do bid responses. We do invoicing. We do, that's just a few things. It's a full-time job. I mean, we're here to provide resources to the federal government, again, until the procurement's changed and they go direct. That's our role.
And you assemble the people that do the work. Is that correct? That is your job? You assemble the people that do the work.
Correct. That can be staff augmentation, where it's one person for a project, or it can be a requirement for a team of resources.
Okay, sort of like, we see, for example...
We're past our time, Mr. Kuzmirchuk.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, go ahead, please.
All right, Barrett.
That we have a round of questions with you. It seems like there's a lot of cleanup afterwards. I have to go back to the question Ms. Block asked you. That was, who were your contacts with the government at the following departments and agencies? CBSA, Innovation, Science, Economic Development Canada, Employment and Social Development Canada. Are you telling us you don't know the answers to that question, or is your answer that you're refusing to provide us with the information that you have?
Oh, not at all. Actually, I think my answer was I will provide those to you in writing after this meeting.
Do you know the answer?
That's exactly what I said.
My question is, do you know? Then provide it,
I do know the answer. I will after this meeting with writing.
You know, I think that you have a grave misunderstanding of how this process works, and your refusal to answer questions here is a contempt of Parliament. And so that is something that we can take up. I know it's great. You take great umbrage in the fact that that a subpoena had to be issued, and that had you not appeared today, a warrant would have been issued and you would have been arrested and brought before this committee. So you're here very much not because you want to be forthcoming. You're here only under the threat of arrest. So that's what we're dealing with and trying to get answers from you. So you'll have to excuse me if I don't believe you, sir, that you're going to bring us the answers after the cameras go off and the committee is adjourned. Because in your first back and forth that you and I had, you admitted to having perjured yourself in a previous appearance at this committee. So I have to go back and talk about that again. You admitted to meeting officials in private residences, and you exposed your own lie. And so I need to know, what are the names of government officials that you have met with anywhere outside of government offices? Just the names.
First of all, I want to address the first thing you said, where I don't want to be here because I want to be arrested. I don't want to be here because my family and myself and my kids have been threatened. And people come like, that's the real reason why I don't want to be here.
The question is very straightforward. It's for a list of names.
Yeah, which I'm happy to give you, and I'm admitting I will give you those within 24 hours after the testimony.
I don't believe you. Did you ever meet with Philip Johnston in a private residence or any place other than a government office?
I've met with Philip Johnston outside of work, yes.
Where?
At a pub.
When?
2021.
We're going to circle back to that. Have you ever met with Min Doan in a private residence or anywhere other than a government office?
No, I have not.
Same question. Cameron McDonald.
I have met him outside of work. We heard the testimony 3 times.
When and where, sir?
I'm happy to provide that information in 24 hours. I don't have that in front of me.
Same question. Antonio Utano.
Yes, I have.
When and where?
Again, I will get you that information.
Kelly Belanger.
I have never met with Kelly Belanger outside of work.
Mark Briard.
Yes, I've met with Mark Briard outside of work.
When and where?
I'll get you that information.
So this is interesting, and so again, you'll have to excuse my my unwillingness to take at face value that you're going to provide us information after, because I asked you these questions when you appeared before this committee before, and you said that you hadn't met with officials, government officials outside of government offices. That, sir, and you can check with your lawyer or with a dictionary, is a lie. It's perjury. At your first appearance before this committee, you testified that you did not know and were not privy to any hospitality being given to anyone who worked for the government of Canada. Is that true, or is that a lie?
I'm answering your question. I've just given you the names of all the people, and I've agreed that I've actually taken these people. We've been outside of work.
The question, sir, is on hospitality. You had said previously that you weren't privy to information on whether that had happened, and it seems like that's a lie.
No, I'm just telling you I'm privy now to information that happened, and I've agreed that those people I've met outside of work.
So, well, you're agreeing now. You disagreed before, sir. Both in documents and testimony, we now know that you, sir, in fact, provided hospitality to Government of Canada officials on multiple occasions, and you lied about it. You lied about it, but you lied about it to the committee. If you're content that everything was well within the bounds, if you've acted above board, my question to you, sir, is why is it every time you come to this committee do you lie to parliamentarians and you lie to Canadians?
I'm telling the truth. I have met with all of those people outside of work in a hospitality manner.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Sousa, please.
Chair, just a point of order. There were a number of instances, obviously, during Mr. Barrett's questions in which the witness point blank refused to answer questions. I wonder if you, as chair, can, on behalf of the committee, direct the witness to provide answers to the questions that were asked.
And Mr. Firth, I think there was a couple you said that you had but would not provide at this time, but we're going to wait till later to provide for us.
That was just the information for the resources of the people, Canadian officials for those certain departments. I'm providing those within 24 hours. The contacts, yes. Like I'm not saying no to any of these questions. I'm just saying I will provide them after.
Do you have? But I guess the question is, do you have that information now with you?
I don't have the information with me right now. That's part of the reason why I'm asking for 24 hours to collect it.
Okay. Yeah, just bear with us.
That is not what the witness said. The witness said, in fact, that with the way the meeting is going, he wasn't prepared to provide them in public. Yeah. So,
Mr. Firth, Mr. Firth, that is, I heard as chair, I have the information, but I'm not going to provide it right now. I'll provide it later in writing, which is different than I don't have the information now. I think you need to be very, very clear with your answers.
I will be very clear.
I don't have this information available to me now. I'll provide it later, or I'm not willing to provide it at this time.
Thank you, Chair. I'll clarify. I have the information, not with me at the present, and I will provide it within 24 hours when I need to collect it.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Firth. I realize it's difficult, but I just ask you please take the time to clarify these things carefully. Mr. Sousa, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Firth, are you aware of cases of bid rigging in the past?
No, I'm not.
In 2009, there was charges of bid rigging between some firms in Ottawa. Was Veritech one of them?
I think there was one of 5 firms, I think, with bid rigging associations. I think so. I think there's been 2 cases. I think there's a previous one with TPG as well, and I think there is another one. I think there's been 2 in all the cases. In all the time since 2003, I think there's only been 2 cases of bid rigging.
And were you involved in any of those cases?
No, I was not.
During your time recently, have you've been approached by the Auditor General in
Same
her
skin
review?
condition as Trump.
I was emailed to give comment on the pieces that involve GC strategies, which you responded to.
The Ombudsman, did you receive any calls from him?
No, I did not.
How about Mr. Lafleur in his investigation that's ongoing?
He reached out to me and actually took a nice stance of understanding well-being, contributing to this testimony, what it's like, and he's actually sent me the questions in writing that I'm going to respond to.
So you have to respond to him still? That hasn't happened?
Correct.
In regards to your earlier testimony around omnibuses, is this something that's in relation to what the Ombudsman talked about when it regards to bait and switch? Can you explain this?
No, and an omnibus contract is usually a large one put out by a big agency like a CRA or even a CVSA. And this would be for general IT services, not specific to a technology. And it would incorporate 20 to 30 different categories and different levels of skill set.
Can you explain what bait and switch is?
Yeah, a bait and switch is when a vendor puts forward a bid, they win the bid, and then they'll switch them out for people that weren't on the bid to do the work. Because typically they'll get more money, or sometimes those people aren't available. Depends how long it takes to evaluate the bid.
Has that happened in your case in the past?
No, actually, thank you. Well, the Ombudsman said of the 76% of the resources that did not work on ArriveCan, we can tell you every single person we put forward that was caught up in a task authorization worked. Nobody we had did not work on ArriveCan, or anybody we presented did not work on ArriveCan.
When it comes to ArriveCan, there's been this $80,000 mention in regards to the establishment, and then it ballooned. And in your case, 11 million is what you say you received. The Auditor General saying 19 million. But can you explain what's the reference to the 80,000 versus what has happened?
I think that was just a proof of concept of us understanding what it would take for paper to go digital. So then it turned into a project. Then all of a sudden it ballooned into PHAC having all these agency requests and policy changes and subsequent amendments after that.
So could ArriveCan ever be produced to the extent that it has been for $80,000?
No, not at all.
It's okay.
You're integrating with back-end systems. You're dealing with like mainframes. You're using like just alone in what AWS charges for cloud services. That wouldn't even cover a month.
Understood. Mr. McDonald called you to contact Bottler. So Mr. McDonald had a relationship with Bottler before you. Is that correct?
They act like they're so confused.
Again, he didn't call me to reach out to Bottler. I was made aware of the situation that the public safety portfolio was having, and at that point, I reached out to Bottler through a LinkedIn communication.
I understand. All right, and then that's when you then went back to McDonald?
Bye, Danielle.
No, that was when I was working with Bottler to put together a proposal, and at that point, submitted it to the CBSA as a point of reference.
You got to go too, Betty.
But you didn't receive a contract.
No, I did not.
Nor did Bottler.
No.
And it was a pilot, but it wasn't. There was no completion. Is that correct?
Yeah, it started. It was actually a feasibility study. It was just to see if this would even integrate into CBSA and whether it would be adopted. My understanding was that the first 2 components were done, which was what they were paid on. It was the second and third part that was never asked for. And
so who paid them though? You didn't pay them.
I paid them.
Who paid you?
Corradix and Dalian paid me.
So they
yes. So they got the margin. I had zero margin on this. I made $0 off Bottler for 2 years.
And so Dalian got a contract with the government relative to the work being done by Bottler on this feasibility study. correct? And I'm not. I think my internet's unstable. I apologize. So I wanted to understand.
Sorry,
this
Mr.
relationship.
Sousa, we're out of time. Can you just finish up with a question for Mr. Firth?
How did Dowling get the contract?
They were advised by the CDSA that there be a task authorization authored to do the bottler work from CDSA. They had an existing contract in place and asked if bottler would work with them for that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mrs. Vignola, please, for 2.5.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Firth, is GC Strategies the only company that you own currently?
Sorry, GC Strategies is the only company that services the federal government, correct?
OK, donc d'autres compagnies, mais qui ne...
So you own other companies, but not companies that deal with the federal government. Now, the amounts received. We read in the newspapers that there was a company that used tax havens. Is that part of your personal values to rely on tax havens?
Sorry, I don't rely on tax havens. The other company that I own that's in there, I think, was something in 2004, which is a venture that started about doing car detailing. It wasn't a offshore account or tax haven.
En 2018, vous...
In 2018, GC Strategies released a memo stating that it was associated with a gentleman who was currently a senator at the time, Senator White. In what context did you have dealings with Mr. White, the senator, and not Mr. White, your partner?
We were introduced to Conservative Senator Vern White at a social event. And at that point, he was in the Senate. He was a retired chief of police from the city of Ottawa, and I think deputy commissioner of RCMP. We were looking at doing some work in the municipalities for Durham and a few others, and he was interested in helping us get some contacts in there. He was never on retainer. He was never paid. We never actually got a contract through Mr. White. He was just more of a strategic advisor when it came to policing and public safety.
J'aimerais revenir sur ce que vous disiez tout à l'heure.
I'd like to come back to what you said earlier regarding Kerala Systems Consulting. Now, when one looks at the public records, there are 3 partners, 3 shareholders, you, Mr. Anthony, and Mr. Caleb White, not to conflate him with Senator White, of course, and that particular company, in fact, existed in 2015, Corridor. Now, you said prior to 2015, you had no involvement, you were not a partner, you just bought it in April 2015, and any data prior to 2015, well, you don't have access to that. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around how things work here.
So it was just a simple acquisition where for a short moment in time from when we bought the company to when our name changed, we were owners of Cordial because we purchased that company for 2 to 3 months, and then the name changed, and that moved over to GC Strategies. It was just an acquisition at that time.
Est-ce que Monsieur Caleb White...
Past our time. Mr. Backrack, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask some questions about why the government needs companies like yours in order to achieve their outcomes. And I'll go back to some testimony, Mr. Firth, from a previous meeting where you said if they want to eliminate the middleman, then they should have the ability to invoice or go directly to some of these people who have the software and have the product. Unfortunately, at this point, that doesn't exist. Why isn't the government able to go directly to vendors and invoice them directly for their services?
So my understanding is you have to become a qualified vendor with PSPC.
The way
And
my
I think
scam works
my understanding
is
is
like
it's
this.
a pretty arduous task to try and do that. And a lot of people don't want to do it. Like, whether you're an independent or whether you're a firm, a lot of people are okay with having a middleman to navigate those potential hurdles for them. So typically by choice, and the ones that do want to do become a qualified vendor and have the opportunity to go direct to the government.
So I guess I'm a little bit unclear here. So the government has these criteria in place and these processes to ensure that vendors are qualified. And the way that vendors can get around that is by, instead of working directly for the government, they could work for another vendor that is a qualified vendor. Is that correct?
So what I'm saying is that every person that right now currently can't go direct, any firm that currently can't go direct to the federal government has the opportunity to. There's a process they can follow to become a qualified vendor. The people who typically go through firms like myself are either the ones that don't already immediately have the qualifications to do so, or are just choosing not to. And then the other ones are independents that would not need to.
In your view, is the government's internal IT capacity a constraint on directly procuring IT services?
Absolutely. I think it's a combination of things.
Yeah. In 2013, the federal government reduced the IT capacity significantly through cuts to internal IT departments. Do you see that as contributing to the situation that you've described?
I can't comment on that, but
Well, you've been working in this line of work for the government since 2007. When those cuts happened in 2013, did that contribute to the situation that we see now, where there's a reliance on these IT recruitment agencies to compile the vendors that are required to complete projects?
I mean, I can't speculate on the whole industry. Apologies for that.
Thanks, Mr. Bachrach. We'll go to Mr. Genuis, please, for 5, and then Ms. Atwin.
Mr. Firth, I want to circle back on some numbers that we discussed in my last round. You told this committee that you and your partner put in about 30 to 40 hours per month over 2 years, and that your take home at the end of the whole ArriveCan process was $2.5 million. I think your figures understate the reality of how much you made. Your invoices don't line up with your own figures, and your figures don't match the Auditor General's. So I think the realities are understated by your numbers. But even if we take at face value your numbers, so doing that math, say 40 hours per month over 2 years, leading to 2.5 million take home, that would measure out that you earned about $2,600 per hour. So, sir, how do you justify to taxpayers that you, as a recruiter, were effectively billing them at over $2,500 per hour for your involvement in the ArriveCan app?
You have to look more about the fact that this is not an hourly job. I mean, it says 30 to 40. I can be working in the evenings. I can be working in the daytimes. I can be working on the weekends. Like, you must appreciate, like, there's a lot more that goes into just getting a set. This is not an hourly job, first of all.
But I asked you the numbers, right? I just asked you to tell us how many hours, and I did a simple calculation based on your estimates. So, okay, maybe you work on weekends, so you think your weekend rate is $5,000 an hour, and your week time rate is only $1,000 an hour. The point is, I just did the math based on your, I think, respectfully lowball numbers. And they come out to $2,600 per hour. Do you think, for Canadians that are struggling under the burden of taxation and other challenges that they face in terms of affordability and cost of living, do you think you can really justify to them that you, who was recruiting other people to do IT work, were billing at $2,600 an hour?
First of all, I don't make this decision. The government obviously sees value in what myself and my firms and firms like us do. So I can't comment on what my hourly wage is. I can just comment on the fact that we've had 55 contracts prior to these ones at CBSA where the government's seen value in everything we do. So
right, sir.
I don't make that decision.
I actually think you make a fair point there. This is a question that I should be asking to the government. If they're paying you at this rate, why are they doing it? And these are questions that I think we need answers to. Sir, I want to ask you about Dalian's role in this deal. We found out some very striking things about Dalian recently. As far as you were able to see, what did they do for the $7.9 million that they purportedly got for their involvement in ArriveCan?
I'm sorry, I had no interactions with during ArriveCan. They had their own contract, and I had my own. I didn't have any interactions.
Did you have any discussions with them before or after the bid?
No, not at all. They were not part of They were not part of any of the three.
So you're telling us you never discussed or the ArriveCan work with Dalian.
Oh no.
Oh, you did discuss it.
Sorry,
before.
go ahead.
Did you or didn't you?
Oh, there was. We've spoken about mobile application work. We've never spoken about contracts. Never spoken about ArriveCan specific. It may have been mobile work.
Sir,
applications.
Did you or did you not have discussions with Dalian about the ArriveCan project, the contracts, the work that was done, anything to do with ArriveCan?
We'd have had conversations, but way after the contracts were awarded. This was nothing to do with back and forth before any contract.
Okay, so do you know what they actually did?
I was not part of their contract. I was not working with them. Like they were completely siloed doing their work, and I was siloed doing my work.
But you had conversations with them, maybe not, but after the fact.
We never had conversations prior to ArriveCan contract awards. We speak.
Sir, I have one more question. This is respectfully getting nowhere. My colleague asked you that the Auditor General found that GC Strategies were involved in the development of a contract from the Government of Canada valued at $2.5 million for your firm received in May 2022, that you were involved in the development of that contract. Could you please tell us, sir, who did you communicate with the Government of Canada for the contract received in May 2022? We want the names, and I would ask you to answer that question. I would ask the chair to put that question to you on behalf of the committee and insist on an answer. And an answer right now.
Are you clear on the question, Mr. Firth?
I am. And again, I'm standing strong with what I've said before. This is being pushed by the committee to put all these allegations up against me and my firm to the RCMP. And at this point, if there's an ongoing investigation, I'm not prepared to comment on it right now.
Just on a point of order, what you think my motivations are for asking the question is not at all germane. I'd like the chair to put the question to you, and you have an obligation to answer it, whether you want to or not, because of the rules that apply to Parliament, to its committees, and to witnesses who come before it. So, Mr. Chair, could you put that question and insist on the
Mr. Firth, we would appreciate an answer, and the fact that you've stated yourself you have not been, or GC or your partner have not been contacted by the RCMP leads me to believe perhaps they're not going down that path with you. So I think the committee and taxpayers would appreciate a response to Mr. Genuis.
Good for you, Macaulay.
Appreciate the question there, Chair. But the truth is, I mean, what's being reported on Twitter, and as a result of some things that are said here in this committee, and the fact that it was pushed by most of the committee members, with everybody that's coming forth of this, to push all information to the RCMP, I have to assume that that actually is happening. And even PSPC and the Auditor General have said they've moved their information over there.
Right, but and again, and I'm sorry to interfere, Mr. Genuis, or intervene, but you've stated yourself they haven't started anything with GC. I'd hate to ask for not be able to get to any responses based on a supposition that they may one day. I think it's a fair question. Would you please provide an answer?
Would you mind if I just take 2 seconds with my lawyer, please?
Of course. Just turn off your mic, please.
See, he's getting stressed out because Barrett turned it up in this third round. Genu smoked him as well. Macaulay's on his ass. Kelly Block nailed him. So he was pretty confident, it would seem, at the beginning of this, like laughing things off and being arrogant, smugly staring into the screen. Now he's talking to his lawyer. I've got that right here. I'm just not gonna. Well, actually, I'm not so pretty. We can just watch our folks. What do you think he's asking his lawyer right now? it'd be interesting to be in that room, and also,
colleagues,
I'm not sure. I think
we
it was
were sorry,
Danielle that pointed out he wasn't
go
alone
ahead,
in
Mr.
that
Firth.
Sorry, thank you. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity, Chair, that you've laid it out clearly, but at this point, we're still remaining with our stance of there possibly being a pending RCMP investigation.
I will advise you, as I'm sure you're aware, you do have parliamentary privilege, which would allow you the right to speak, but I understand. I'll let my colleagues who brought up the question pursue it a different way. We have Miss Atwin for 5, and then we will take our second suspension. Go ahead, Miss Atwin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Firth, in my previous questions, I asked about the government tracking your performance, and you mentioned that there were quarterly reports. Have you previously been asked to present these to committee?
She's a twit.
No, I have not.
Could you please do so? I'd be interested in seeing those.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Also, you mentioned not being fully aware of what the allegations of Bottler AI against you. And just from what we've had from their testimony, they're alleging issues around invoicing, delays in payments, deliverables of the project not reflecting the actual work they did, the inflated work experience on the CV, which they assert are all against basic procurement rules. I know you don't want to speak specifically to those allegations because there's potentially the pending investigation, but have you ever been the subject of a complaint from any other subcontractors that you've worked with?
I have not.
Okay. And what do you say just to those ones that I've outlined, if you can? Do you have a response to that?
Just with the 2 that I can, where I don't think there's allegations. They were paid for all the work that they had done on all the deliverables they had delivered. And the reason I think for why they're claiming they weren't paid for the last bit was they were actually fired, and what they delivered was actually not what was in the statement of work to be completed.
Okay.
That's probably all I can say right now.
And you mentioned also that that Galleon and Cordex were siloed during this time, and you didn't have interactions regarding the ArriveCan app. But you also mentioned that it was GC Strategies that paid Bottler AI through Dalian. So would there not have been interactions regarding that?
She is Liberal.
Yeah, but Bottler's not part of the ArriveCan project. Bottler was completely independent to ArriveCan, and was actually before ArriveCan.
Okay. And I mean, we've mentioned a bit about how journalists have been following this very closely. There's been many published articles on this. Have you spoken to any journalists?
No, I have not.
Is there a desire to do so, to kind of clear up anything that's been reported in the media?
Yep, there will be after this testimony. We'll be answering questions.
Okay. Both the Office of the Auditor General and the Office of the Procurement Ombud found that GC Strategies did not meet the document safeguarding capability requirement in effect when it was awarded its contract. To the best of your knowledge, how did GC Strategies manage to be awarded a contract without meeting the security requirement?
So actually going to quote something that happened was actually clarified by PSBC in the last testimony, where PSBC clarified that a distinction needed to be made between a security clearance of an organization or staff member and the capacity requested by an organization. It is not necessary for an organization to have that capacity at the time of contract award. It is normal that a contract will be awarded without that capacity being pre-verified for contract security. Otherwise, there is an amendment to withdraw that requirement as it's not necessary, and that's what happened for us in our contract.
And so, as part of this contract, did GC Strategies and or its resources ever have access to classified data or information without having been properly screened?
Yes, so everybody gets screened by the PSBC, and then secondly, they get screened by CBSA specific. There's every CBSA person has to get screened twice.
Okay. So also in the Office of Procurement Ombud's report, so there was the assessment worksheets for resources added through task authorizations under a contract awarded to GC Strategies stood out from the others. For this contract valued at $25.3 million, there were 42 task authorizations. The OPO found assessment worksheets for resources on 6 of the 42 task authorizations issued under this contract. It did not demonstrate the proposed resource met mandatory criteria or support points awarded for point-rated criteria. There were numerous examples where the supplier had simply copied and pasted requirements from mandatory and point-rated criteria as project experience for the resource. Is it standard practice for suppliers to copy and paste requirements from mandatory and point-rated criteria as project experience on their proposed resources?
So what was the number there for which number you were from for the OPO?
So 16 out of the 42.
Okay. Yes. Well, firstly, that's actually incorrect, that statement. We've actually gone through and reviewed all the resumes and the evaluation grids that would have been supported those 42 task authorizations. And we've identified there as bullet points in the resources resumes that clearly show this experience was outside the supposed cut and paste. Again, that number 16 was drastically inaccurate compared to what we've gone through for our evidence. And secondly, the TA stage, you have to appreciate it's business one, right? So every time this opportunity for CBSA to evaluate this, but even more clearly, at that point, they can either choose to accept or not accept the resource. But all of those people on the 42 task authorizations that currently worked there before. So again, I hope that answers your question.
Yep, thank you. So in your view, were the government's resource criteria for ArriveCan work realistic and reasonable?
Yeah, they did the e-portal review and there was fully qualified vendors who could work on that.
Thank you very much. That is our time, colleagues. We will suspend for about 5 minutes.
All right. So what do you guys want to do for the next 5 minutes? I'll try to do it a little bit smoother than what we were doing last time. Try to find a quick video that we can watch. No, that'll chase everybody away. I don't have a lot of videos that are 5 minutes long. Oh, we can take a peek at this. Bombs on how bad things are in Canada for Canadians, what the issues are, why Trudeau has to go, what his chances are in the next election. There's a lot of things he discusses here. It's quite revealing to watch Stephen Harper back in action speaking about Canada.
I would describe the current Canadian foreign policy as seeking non-strategic autonomy. Seemingly fights with everyone for no apparent reason. Real income, the per capita income of Canadians is actually declining. For that reason alone, the government is 20 points behind in the polls and will be defeated in 2 years.
Prime Minister Harper, I can't resist but ask you, so pardon me. How's Canada doing? I mean, look, I didn't know how to phrase this question, but millions are talking about your country. You must be happy, right?
I'm trying to be diplomatic about this. We've talked, and I've heard you talk, Samir, about parts of the world, India certainly, that's so central to ORF, the Gulf, and maybe a few others seeking what you call strategic autonomy.
Correct.
I would describe the current Canadian foreign policy as seeking non-strategic autonomy. That is, seemingly fights with everyone for no apparent reason. So look, we'll just leave that aside. Look, the reality in Canada is this, and look, I'm not a supporter of the government. I think everyone knows that, so my views won't be a big surprise, but I think objectively speaking, first of all, I might dispute with David about how well the American economy is actually doing. It's clearly not doing well in Canada. In fact, the real income, the per capita income of Canadians is actually declining in the last couple of years. And there are very few prospects of growth. For that reason alone, the government is 20 points behind in the polls and will be defeated in 2 years.
Sorry, guys.
So that's kind of the prospects for Canada. And I don't think, you know, there's always, of course, a chance that a government's in trouble, seeks a bunch of new policies to turn things around. But I think we're likely looking at 2 long years and then a change of government, and then we'll see what happens.
Your assessment of what's happening in Afghanistan, why have you forgotten about Afghanistan? I think that's a fair question to ask. We moved to the next crisis. Nothing has been done about the previous one. And there's a question that was asked by James, Africa. And is it time to get our act together, work together as a coalition from the Indo-Pacific to Europe to put together something which is worthwhile for that continent.
I would reiterate some of the things said. When I said there needs to be a reassertion of American and broader Western leadership, I'm not referring just to security. I do think we've also kind of lost the focus on development leadership as well. And I think that's the coordination and the development and the really getting into that business back into that business in a very meaningful way with a very different model than the Chinese and Russians others are offering is something very important that needs to be done.
And Afghanistan?
Well, look, all I can say about Afghanistan is I just, like as you know, I'm a philosophical conservative, and I continue to be just very, very frustrated by the number of decisions I see being made in the world that are just not based on kind of firm international policy reality. I remember at the time Afghanistan was falling through the unprovoked surrender of the Biden administration. The word out there, well, it wasn't going to be so bad because this was a new Taliban and they'd learned. Like who could realistically think the Taliban would be different the second time than they were the first time? And I say, I just keep hoping that somehow we will banish these kinds of notions in our thinking and bring a lot more hard-headedness to international affairs, because the Afghanistan thing is a disaster.
So Stephen Harper, what do you think? I didn't like him when he was Prime Minister. A funny story about that. I was at a hockey game where the PMO's office was taking pictures. You could meet Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister. I told my buddy, I'm going to go up there and give him a piece of my mind. I chickened out at the last minute and just got a picture with him and the current Premier of Nova Scotia. Pretty funny. I'm a chicken. Like and subscribe. Canadian politics. We're learning all about it right here. Having a great time. We'll share that with you. So like and subscribe, get notified, share it with somebody. We have fun on this channel all the time. We'll catch you next video. All right, guys, we're back over here, and we're just waiting for them to kick back in. They said they'd be 5 minutes. That video is 5 minutes. So yeah, we're just gonna hang and wait a couple of minutes. That is a funny story. Back when my buddy and I were at the home opener for the Halifax Mooseheads, it was either that or yeah, I know, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. And Harper was there with Roddy MacDonald, who was at the time the Prime Minister or Premier of Nova Scotia, and you could go up and get your picture taken. So me and my buddy are having some drinks at the hockey game, whatever, and times weren't great then under Harper. They weren't, like, not nearly as bad as things are now. But anyways, I'm like kind of drinking. I'm like, I'm going to go and tell those guys screw them or whatever. And by the time I got up there, I was too chicken. I chickened out and then just had that uncomfortable picture taken. However, it's pretty funny. I got the letter like a couple of weeks later with the photograph mailed to me from the Prime Minister's office. It was pretty cool. So, and we're just about back, guys. Let me get this ready. And here we go. We're ready to go. All right.
Your company has contracts with private companies.
Yes, we do.
Dans quel secteur?
In what particular sector?
Yes, we did, rather.
Dans quel secteur?
In what particular sector or sectors?
Sorry, apologies, I missed the last one.
Okay, what kind of activities are they involved in?
Oh, general IT. Oh, the private companies?
Mm-hmm.
There are IT software firms. They are system integrators.
Parlons maintenant de la qualité de votre...
Let's now talk about the quality of your work with ArriveCan. What are your thoughts about the final product, with all the ups and downs, the vicissitudes that Canadians had to come to grips with throughout this application and its process?
I think understanding the circumstances where the whole of Canada and the whole of the world was in, and the fact that this went through 170 renditions and they were delivered always on time, I think our work was done very well, and I feel like the application was a success. I believe it was 260. I believe the application was a success. We had 260 million times the app was open. Right?
A success. You're saying that your application was a success. You're serious now, right?
I think it did exactly what it was supposed to. It was to help open the borders. It was help to streamline the process. It was to be a low touch application. I think if you look at those, there was a moving target. There was PHAC was sending out new policies every month or so.
OK, Monsieur Firth, qu'est-ce que vous avez à dire
Mr. Firth, what do you have to say to the over 10,000 people who have joined a class action lawsuit because your app led them to be subjected to a quarantine that they weren't supposed to be subjected to? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's very unfortunate for those 10,000 people, but I cannot comment on things that happen within the application.
Pardon?
I provide the resources.
Monsieur un instant, là.
Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec. You said that it was a success. And yet, thousands of Canadians were affected in this way. Over 10,000 Canadians have filed a class action against your app because your app led to a quarantine that they should never have been subjected to. So why are you washing your hands of this and passing the buck?
I'm sorry, I really have no comment on this. That's not my line of expertise.
Incroyable.
Unbelievable. If it's not your bailiwick or expertise, whose is it if it's not yours?
We were not involved in the architecture. You understand this project was derived and project managed by the CBSA.
Mon Dieu.
My God. How are you going to tell these over 10,000 people that you raked in profits of millions of dollars with this application? Is it really worth $2.5 million in windfalls? We're talking about 10,000 people who were quarantined that never should have been because of your app.
Sorry, can you repeat? My headphones just broke.
OK. Vous avez affirmé tantôt.
Listen, you asserted earlier that you made a profit of $2.5 million. That's those are your figures. We know that the AG doesn't think so, but we'll take what you said at face value. That's $2.5 million for 40 hours per month. You've made a profit of $2.5 million for this app. And yet I'm telling you that there are 10,200 Canadians that were subject to quarantine when they shouldn't have been because of your app, because that is what has occurred, and you're saying that it was a success. Was it really worth $2.5 million profit, that kind of success story?
Like I said previously, I don't make that decision. The government obviously sees value in what we do. That's why we were working there for 3 years.
Alors, c'est qui le responsable?
So, where does the buck stop if it doesn't stop with you?
Again, I did not make the decision. The government sees value in what we do. We were not part of architecting this application.
Thank you very much, sir. Over to you, Mr. Jawari, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Firth, I'm going to pick up where I left, and I want to close the loop on the rate to the Crown. So, as a confirmation, the rate to the Crown is determined by the Crown based on available market rate and availability at that time, and that's communicated to the vendor, the rate that's going to be accepted. And this rate is inclusive of the hourly rate as well as the
Mr. Pickles, what's up?
What we call the per diems for food, transportation, and all of that. Is my statement correct?
Somewhat. So, however many people are responding to an RFP, they will give their financial bid. What that means is there will be, I will determine that I think somebody is worth $1,400. Another vendor may say, I think that person's worth $1,500. And then they say the third vendor says, I think they're worth $1,300. The Crown would determine through a median band that the Crown determines the rate as a result of those three bids is $1,400.
Thank you for that. Okay, so that clarifies that the rate that the Crown developed is a median of the rate by the vendors who are responding to the RFP, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, perfect. So can you tell me how many of the bids that you received for ArriveCan was a open bid?
There's only one.
Okay.
The other three still required price. This is to be clear, though.
Yeah.
The other three
I'm only
still
interested in
require
ArriveCan.
price substantiation.
Mr. Firth, I'm only interested in ArriveCan because I'm trying to keep the focus on ArriveCan. My other colleagues want to go to, RCMP, or they want to go around the other route with Butler. I'm sticking with ArriveCan. So what basically I understand or process is the fact that this was a closed bid, and the rate that was established for ArriveCan, naturally, because there were not multiple bids, was the rate that you had put in as a suggested rate to the Crown. Is my understanding correct?
Correct, but there was also price substantiation that had to be provided. What they did for that, the PSPC requested that I provide 4 other competitive bids that have similar categories and rates. So how they determined that way, there's actually going off 4 different other competitive contracts that determine what the median was. So there was price substantiation. Although there were sole source contracts, they still had to be price substantiated.
Okay, so
to prove value to the Crown.
Okay, now, and off of that, I don't understand. The Crown asked you to provide 4 others rather than them going and finding 4 others, and then they looking at the medium. That I don't still understand, and I don't think that's the right way of doing it. That's basically, I consider as a conflict of interest. Now, let's go back to the number of RFPs. How many RFP have you responded to the government since 2015 that you have managed to secure between 60 to 65 contracts?
Oh, how many? 100 and 190, 200?
So you, of the 200 or 190 RFP that you've responded, you've secured 60, correct? So 60, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, well, if you look through the contract list, there's other ones which are 25K sole sources.
Yeah, I understand. So my question was, how many RFP have you bid? Because I'm trying to figure out your success rate. So if your success rate is 100%, then I like to question that. If your success rate is 30%, I like to say, okay, reasonable. What is your success rate as far as securing government contract among those you call, among those that you have bid on that you've secured 60 to 65?
15%.
So 15% of the contracts you've managed to secure 15% of the contracts that you have bid as part of the RFP. So 60 to 65%, 60 to 65 contract represent 15% of the contracts that you bid, and you have won.
65 would be closer probably to 50, because again, some of those ones are $25,000 sole sources, which were directed, like they were closed bids. So ones which are open for competitive processes, about 15%.
15%. Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Chair, how much?
Time.
Okay.
Yeah. A couple of seconds pass. Thanks. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Firth, I had a question earlier about the daily invoices, and you confirmed the name of the individual, Mr. Ms. Huspith, CBSA. Now, should it be my understanding that that individual was working for you as a subcontractor and at the same time was wearing another hat working for CBSA during the same period?
I think he was working for me as a subcontractor to CBSA. It's the same thing.
OK, donc il travaillait comme sous-contractant.
So he was a subcontractor for CBSA as the same time as being a subcontractor for you in relation to matters concerning CBSA? Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
OK. Donc, je vais essayer de...
I'll try and sum up what I was trying to say. The invoice that we saw was Dalian. Well, not an invoice per se, but a bank transfer. It was a bank transfer to you for Hoodspith CBSA. So Dalian had received a contract from CBSA and the payment, referring to Butler AI, of course, but the payment for Mr. Hulsmith went through you. But at the same time, Mr. Hulsmith was a subcontractor for CBSA. So do you understand the line in the sand that I'm trying to make? Because he was wearing two hats. He was a subcontractor in two places and yet for the same department at the same time.
Yeah, sorry, without having that information in front of me, it doesn't seem possible because CBSA has a rule where you can only be on one task or authorization. That's how to eliminate that from happening, that you can only be on one task authorization at the same time. The only thing I could think of that could have happened was maybe there's a delay in billing, but again, CBSA are pretty good. They make sure that there's only ever one person, their name's on one task authorization.
Donc, une autre chose à vérifier, un autre...
So, one more thing to check. That individual was thereafter transferred to the Public Health Agency of Canada. So there was a transfer that occurred, but that was only by way of chance.
Correct, please, for 2.5, sir.
What's going on?
There we go. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Firth, I'd like to go back to this issue of security clearances, and the Office of the Ombudsman found that GC Strategies did not meet the document safeguarding capability at the time it was awarded the $13.9 million non-competitive contract for professional services with CBSA. When did you find out that you did not meet the security clearance for that contract?
We were told, I think it was from the amendment was made at the contract 13 months after it was awarded.
So 13 months into the contract, you were notified that you did not meet the security clearance?
We were notified that they were removing that prerequisite because it wasn't necessary.
Hey, Linda, what's up?
And who
Ken,
notified you of that?
I don't mind Vignola. She's usually, from what I've seen...
I'll have to speak to my business partner. He gets all of the security information.
In the middle.
And did you communicate to them about the security clearance prior to that?
Nope. This is just there was a component within the RFP that was not directed towards the vendor. It was just something. Again, it was an amendment that was removed after the fact.
It just seems that, like, going back to your previous point or your previous testimony about why the government would rely on your company, one of the reasons is because other companies don't necessarily meet the pre-qualifications to engage in these government contracts. And yet here's a case where your company didn't meet the qualifications for this contract, and the way that the government found a way around it was simply by removing that requirement. Did they express? Yeah, did they express to you why they removed the requirement?
No, so sorry. My understanding is that at the point of contract award, it isn't determined whether or not they have to have this certain document safeguarding. It's only after the fact, once the project is got going, they decide to remove it or not. We're dealing with invoices. We're not dealing with protected information. That was the determination after the fact was we were not required to have that at all.
But at the time you signed the contract, you were required to have it. Is that correct?
That's what the RFP says.
That's what the RFP says. And yet CBSA did not flag that requirement with you when they signed the contract?
But again, if you would let me quote just what the PSPC, who's much more experienced than this than I am, They said PSBC clarified that a distinction needed to be made between a security clearance of an organization or a staff member and the capacity requested by an organization. It is not necessary for an organization to have the capacity at the time of contract award. It is normal that a contract be awarded without the capacity, which is us, being pre-verified by contract security. Otherwise, there has to be an amendment to withdraw that requirement as it was not necessary, which is what happened for this contract.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barrett, please, for 5.
Is a significant part of your job contacting and communicating with government, their departments, agencies, or crown corporations?
Yes, it is.
And how many hours per month would you say that you spend on that?
It's hard to quantify that, because if we're busy with existing contracts, then there's contract management and other components versus new business development and interactions and identifying new opportunities.
Let's look for a number. You can use you and your partner combined. Mr. Anthony, how many hours per month?
Sorry, I can answer that honestly, accurately, sorry.
Is it more than 80?
Yes, per month, for sure.
More than 80 per month. Okay. Is it more than 100?
I can't quantify. I'm just giving you an answer of 80. More than 80.
So do you also that includes proactively making the government aware of the services that you offer?
Again, sorry, it depends. It depends on whether or not we are. With ArriveCan, there was not 80 hours of meeting and proposing and getting new business because we were managing 100 resources at that time.
Are you registered?
So it varies.
Are you registered to lobby?
No, I'm not, because we do not charge a fee.
As an owner of GC Strategies, you obviously have control over your company's website. You were here 16 months ago as part of the Arrive scam inquiry, and I asked you in October 2022 to provide names of senior government officials that offer glowing endorsements for you on your website. I want to read some of those because you haven't had a chance over the last 16 months, I guess, to furnish us with that information. Here's one for you. I think they are first and foremost are a taxpayer. They, GC Strategy, see the bigger picture and do not chase the quick sale. I think they are first and foremost are a taxpayer and see efficiency and getting the best value for government. That's the Chief Data Officer of the public sector. Who was that? What's their name?
So first of all, apologies for not getting that information to you. I thought I had. I mean, I sent hundreds of pages at that date, and I'm more than happy to give you that information in writing.
Okay, let's be serious, sir. You've had 16 months, and so you want us to believe that you're going to provide us with that information now that you've been asked again. Government of Canada senior executive said, quote, GC Strategies listen and try to find solutions to my problem versus selling me a solution to a problem I've never had. Who was that person?
So I'm sorry, you can ask me the 3 or 4 that are on there, and my answer is going to be the same. I will get you that information. I promise you that. I thought I'd sent it over 16 months ago.
Let me be very clear that in the Arrive scam, there are all kinds of players who play all kinds of different roles, and you've demonstrated yourself to be a liar. You've lied before a parliamentary committee on multiple occasions. You even undertook to provide to me this information 16 months ago. You and I had this exchange. And now you're here, and the only reason you came was because you were threatened to be arrested, and you've come virtually, and now your undertaking is to provide the information you promised, cross your heart, that you're going to do it this time, but you couldn't do it before. It strains reason and certainly demonstrates that you don't have any credibility when it comes to the questions that we ask, and which leaves me to wonder what I should even bother asking you, because
Thanks, Terry.
I can't believe anything that you're going to say. Will you provide us with those names right now? You obviously know who the VP of a major crown corporation was who appears on your website. The Chief Information Officer for the Government of Canada. What was the name? You know.
I said previously, I will give you these information.
No, sir. I do not accept that. You will provide this committee with a name.
You told us
I said I'll
16
give
months.
it to you then. I
You've
will
had
provide
16
you with
months.
the name.
You've had 16 months to do it. And this is your opportunity now to demonstrate that you are true to your word. So are you going to make that demonstration, or are you going to prove what we know to be true, and that's that you're not honest?
Like I said, I appreciate the question. I will give you the answers.
Yet your appreciation for the question isn't the reason that I asked it. I'm looking for
Again, I will give you the answers.
I'm looking
Oh my
for the
goodness.
information.
That's funny.
I said I would give you the information.
Yeah, you also said that 16 months ago. Sir, it is not just contempt of Parliament, but it's contemptuous to Canadians. They are lined up at food banks in record numbers, and you are raking in millions of dollars off the backs of Canadians. And then when you're called to provide even just the smallest bit of accountability, you laugh in Canadians' face. And it's disgusting, to be clear. And well, we'll see if you do in fact provide those names finally this time. But after 16 months, I certainly don't believe you, and neither can Canadians. Thanks. That is our time. Mr. Firth, you're welcome to offer a quick response. Otherwise, we'll go to Mr. Kosmuchuk. Mr. Firth, did you want to respond to that? Okay. Mr. Kosmuchuk, please. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will have a motion before the that I'd like to put forward as well before my time expires, Mr. Chair. So if you can give me a heads up, so that I can put a motion forward.
I'm sorry. Are you intending just to read it into the record, or are you putting it as a matter of hand motion?
Matter of hand.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
The Auditor General, so GC Strategies is essentially a staffing IT agency, and the Auditor General noted the differences between the per diem costs of a private staffing agency versus a public, someone that works in the public service in the IT sector. And so the per diem cost that the AG noted was about $1,090 for a staffing agency versus the per diem cost for a public sector IT professional, which is about $675. It's almost double. It's reflective as well of what we're seeing. For example, we hear a lot in the news these days about private nursing staffing agencies. And so, for example, a regular RN, registered nurse working for a public hospital, for example, will make about $40 an hour. Whereas a private staffing agency, a private staffing nurse will typically make about $90 to $100 per hour, and in some instances, $160 per hour. So what we're seeing in the IT sector is also what we're seeing in when it comes to nursing and healthcare and other sectors as well too. Can you tell us why is there such an increase in the cost of contracts for private sector staffing agencies like GC Strategies or nurses in the case of nursing? If you can sort of highlight or enlighten us why such an increase.
Well, the one that comes to mind is just the type of work these resources will be doing. In the private sector, whether it's Shopify or whatever, it's more innovative technology and more innovative solutions. And whereas in the public sector, you're dealing with more of a mainframe system or more older back-end systems, and sometimes outdated technology as well. So I think just
Fred, what's up, man?
The private sector can charge more, I think, because they're going back to companies which are either paying more because they just know that they're trying to get a specific skill set with it, because they're always advancing technology. And there's probably only 20, 30 people or 50 people who can do that versus 70 or 80 or 100 or 300 people who can do Java or .NET or more of an established technology.
And Mr. Firth, where is the top talent migrating to, the public sector or the private sector when it comes to IT?
Private.
Private sector. Is it even close?
No, it's not close.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that for those that aren't initiated in the IT world?
Yeah, I mean, for example, we can have if you were to do side-by-side comparisons of the same requirement with the same experience, people are going to want to work for, it sounds kind of like they want to work for a private sector firm that has beanbags, that has all of these other perks that come working at just a job where I feel like there's it's a harder sell to try to get somebody to come and work for a public sector.
Salaries are bigger in the private sector or the public sector?
In the private. I mean, there used to be a desire to come and work for the government. You'd have your pension and so forth. Whereas the problem is now the delta between the two are so that you can work in the private sector, save your money, and it'd be in a better environment, and you'd also have just as much as if you had a pension.
And you mentioned Veritech. You worked for Veritech, which is a company that was operating long before 2015. I'm looking at they've received hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts from the previous government.
You have about 45 seconds left, sir.
Oh, okay, I will move to my motion then, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the heads up. So, we heard a lot of discussion today about vendors and suppliers coming together to design the mandatory criteria. And the concerns that were outlined by the Auditor General and by the Ombudsman that this might actually artificially reduce competition. I think competition here is something serious that we raised a number of times, even today around this table. And so I think we do have a Competition Bureau Commissioner here in Canada. I'd like to hear from Mr. Boswell, who's the Competition Bureau Commissioner. And the reason I say that is because it's the role of the Competition Bureau Commissioner to ensure fair competition, to enforce fair competition, but also the Competition Bureau Commissioner provides advice to tendering agencies on how to protect the process, how to protect the competitive process. And as well, I would add that the Competition Bureau Commissioner also recently introduced or released what's called the Collusion Risk Assessment Tool. So I think the Competition Bureau Commissioner would provide some incredible light and information on securing and protecting competition in the procurement process. And so my motion is that I would ask that the committee invite the Competition Bureau Commissioner to appear for 2 hours on government procurement processes and address issues of competition, fair bidding, bid rigging, and how tendering authorities can protect the bid process, the competitive bid process itself. I think we would absolutely benefit from speaking with the Competition Bureau Commissioner.
Thanks. We'll start a speaking order. Mr. Genuis.
Chair, I think there's unanimous support for this motion, and I don't want to take time away from our limited time for witness. So I think if you put the question now, you'll find there's unanimous support for this, and we can just move on.
I think we were at that point before your intervention. Thank you. Colleagues, are we comfortable with that? Yes. We could actually maybe even do it parallel to the red tape reduction or as part of the red tape reduction, but we seem to have unanimous consent, so adopted. Thank you, Mr. Kusmirchak. I appreciate that. We're now going to Mr. Baird, I believe, or Mr. Genuis? Yes. Mr. Genuis, please go ahead, sir.
This will be fun.
Thank you. Mr. Firth, how many current contracts do you have with the Government of Canada?
We have 0 contracts right now.
Okay. Is it not the case that you have one outstanding that ends at the end of March?
Nope. That was cancelled. The resources were pulled off the project.
Okay. And this is because you've been suspended from getting certain kinds of contracts with the government, correct? Suspended but not outright banned. Is that accurate?
Correct. We've been suspended. But
okay.
We've lost our security clearance. We've lost our security clearances as well, so we cannot actually bid on that work.
Okay.
Well, any work.
How are you informed about this change to your procurement status?
Well, at first we found out in the House of Commons when the minister declared it. We weren't aware of it. And then secondly, we were let know by PSPC.
Okay, so the minister said it before the contract had actually been canceled?
Yeah, and also before our security had been canceled.
Okay, so what was the lag time between the minister saying it had happened and when it actually happened?
3 hours.
Okay, so it happened the same day. Who from PSPC contacted you?
Can I get that to you? I don't have that in front of me right now.
Can you get it to us by 5 o'clock?
I think it was on, yes, by 5 o'clock, yes.
Okay. Were you contacted by any other departments?
Only those people who had resources remaining in there who actually removed the resources from their project.
Okay. On what dates were you contacted by other departments?
Again, can I kindly ask that I get that to you?
By 5, please. In the lead up to these changes, were you in discussions with government officials? Did you have any conversations about the possible suspension?
I was in I had a conversation with a gentleman from PSBC where I indicated that I actually was going to terminate my security before it was suspended, because when you have no government contracts, it's kind of hard to get.
Who were you in touch with at PSBC? What's the gentleman's name?
I think his name's Nolan. No, Nolan was his first name, and I can't remember his last name. Sorry, Belleville.
Okay.
I think Nolan was his first name.
Okay. And could you give us dates for those discussions?
Yes, I can.
Okay. What does the GC and GC strategy stand for?
Sorry?
What does the GC?
Just Government of Canada. Just Government of Canada.
Okay. Government of Canada Strategies is the full name. Did you discuss your testimony today with anybody from the government?
No, I did not.
Okay. You'll confirm that, and we'll be able that you didn't just have any discussions with anyone.
I can confirm that.
Okay. Sir, I want to give you one more chance to answer the question that I asked previously. I think you should understand and appreciate the powers that Parliament has and the critical role that Parliament has in getting information from Canadians. And you may not like the criticism that entails, that sometimes flows from it, but we have a responsibility to stand up for taxpayers, and that includes being able to fulfill our functions as parliamentarians. So can you provide the names of the officials who you met with that I had previously requested for the contract where you sat down with government officials and worked out the terms of that contract? Can you provide the names of who you met with?
I appreciate the question, but unfortunately, again, I'm still taking the same stance that I was brought in here before the investigation was completed. And all assumptions is the RCMP has every allegation that's surrounding this. So at that point, I cannot interject.
Sir, have you been briefed by your lawyer on the constitutional principle of the supremacy of Parliament, the rights that parliamentary committees have when it comes to requesting information, the fundamental powers that in a democracy the legislature has to have? Have you been briefed on these issues? And if you have, then why do you persist in just disregarding those requirements?
I appreciate the question. So unfortunately, I can't comment on that. But the conversations between myself and my lawyer are privileged.
You're privileged, all right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think there's quite an assertion of privilege from you that ignores the rights and responsibilities of democratically elected legislative bodies. So
that is our time, Mr. Generous. We'll go on to Mr. Sousa. Sorry, we'll go to Mr. Sousa, please, for 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we're wrapping up soon. I just wanted to address some of the issues in respect to the use of ArriveCan. And I know, Mr. Firth, this is not necessarily under your responsibility, and you made that clear in terms of the actual engagement or the final use of the product, but how many Canadians use the application that you were involved with? Do you have a sense?
That's numbers where the actual application itself was opened 260 million times, and it's being used by around 40 million people.
And there were some that were detained inappropriately, I understand. I was one of them, in fact. And but that number is, I think someone quoted 10,000. Is that right?
That's my belief, yeah.
But it's been applied, it's been used, and quite extensively, as you just so noted. And in the development of this product, it seems to be assumed that you're the sole provider, but can you advise the public that's watching how many contractors are actually part of the development of the ArriveCan application?
I think the number the AG threw out was around 19 different other firms, different vendors.
And then the other issue is the expertise and the skill set within the civil service to provide this application. And I want to try to equate this as though we have a lot of real estate, a lot of assets, a lot of engagement, and this application is also has intellectual property. There's an asset value to this application. Is that correct?
Yeah, this was not throwaway code. The government of Canada owns all the IP, which I'm assuming is a platform for building other applications off of it.
So when the government engages the construction of a building, do they do it themselves or do they contract out?
They would contract that out.
And we would involve a contractor, and that contractor then uses subcontractors to provide the construction of that asset.
Correct. We act as a general contractor.
And the general contractor in the construction of a building will take a percentage of the overall cost of that contract. Is that how it works?
That's correct.
And some of those buildings could be $100 million construction of a 350 unit building. Let's assume it's $100 million. They take what kind of percentage, that general contractor? Do you have a sense? Do you have a know?
No, I'm sorry. I don't. I'm guessing it's over 20%.
And there's an evaluation, mind you, when they do a contract. There's a sense of what that value should be, and then it's audited and monitored to ensure that there's no overruns. Does that happen in this case when you're involved?
Yeah, there'll always be back and forth with the financial groups and the procurement and the contracting areas to make sure that, again, there's significant run rate left on a task authorization. There's enough money left on a contract. You can't go over, so they're always timing their deliverables with financial lines in place to make sure that there's always the funds in place to finish a part of the work.
Do you have a sense of how many contracts the Government of Canada does annually? And also, not just IT, in a whole suite of activities.
I have no idea. Thousands, I'm guessing.
And then the outcome and the value for money, which is the crux of this thing, right? We're all trying to assess who's getting paid. Is somebody taking privilege in these contracts? Is somebody milking the system? And either general has cited that there could be better value for money in this instance. That didn't occur. But what's your perception of the value for money in this situation, given the pandemic and what took place?
Obviously, I only spoke of the component that I was working with.
Yes.
And I can speak very highly of the team of 30 or 40 people that were working 12, 14-hour days, 7 days a week, hitting 170. I mean, I challenge anybody to put that much effort in. The prices were substantiated by the rate, so by the Crown, sorry. And I mean, I think the team that was put forward did a great job.
And during that process, you had interaction, presumably, with the employer, the buyer, to verify the consequence of what you were doing, correct? Is that correct?
Yeah, we submit monthly invoices. We don't get a check up front. And any time those invoices can be rejected or timesheets can be rejected, but the fact that they were approved every single month for 27 to 36 months told us we were doing a good job. You guys would not have paid otherwise.
And you were a verified contractor long before ArriveCan and long before the Liberal government was in power. Is that correct?
Yeah, just
not a GC strategy. As an individual.
PSBC identified us before the first COVID contract as a vendor of good record.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Sousa. Mrs. Vignola for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Firth, we find ourselves in a situation here where we need IT technologists and specialists, and increasingly so, and AI isn't the silver bullet. So about 10, 12 or so years ago, the Harper government made cutbacks to IT specialists and their ranks by saying, well, since there aren't any projects, why pay them? So you're a consultant, and I imagine you can respond to this issue. whether it be a government or a company, to have specialized IT experts under their employ. In 2024, would they be paid to do nothing? Is that even remotely possible in 2024?
I think it would be hard for the government to sustain a bench of resources with very specific skill sets. I think it would be an undertaking that would be A, hard to find the people, B, make them want to stay in one position. People like being consultants because they can bump around. And I think the model is something between what we have now and what's currently in place, is where you get your hired guns, you bring them in for a project and then let them go. I mean, otherwise you have unions involved and you have benches of resources sat doing nothing. So I think there is a place for contractors to continue doing.
Il serait impossible.
So it would be impossible that one would have IT resources who would work full-time. That doesn't exist anywhere in the world, eh? I see. Well. Now, that said, the only way that I see this playing out is to have departments that are au fait with the procurement process and know how to manage it properly. Now, if you take a step back from this current situation, as difficult as that might be, do the departments currently, are they able to supervise and monitor projects of substantive size currently, properly?
I'm sorry, just a brief answer if you can, Mr. Firth.
You can. Hello? Yes, I believe you can.
I think we have you frozen, Mr. Firth. Give us a couple seconds, please.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if my internet is unstable right now, but I missed your last prompt there. Were you indicating it was my turn?
No, sorry. I think we have Mr. Firth is frozen.
I'm not getting
from looking at his
any audio. You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
No, I'm not.
I actually think it's them. I can hear you.
Oh,
you can hear me? Yeah,
I can hear you, but I don't think they can hear us.
I can hear you, Taylor.
Mr. Backrack, I can hear you well, and now Mr. Firth is back on. Can you hear us okay?
I can now, yes.
Okay. Mr. Firth, can you, are you okay just answering the question from Mrs. Vignola?
I'm sorry, I lost your internet got kind of
okay.
at the
Can
very
you repeat the question, please?
So if he were to freeze up, would they be allowed to arrest him?
Imagine you took a step back from the situation and you had observed what has gone on, and that the record management and the management of procurement, it's of course the bailiwick of the department. Do you believe that that management, that oversight, that monitoring of procurement files and contracts is sound? Or is there room for improvement to avoid the kinds of situations that we're coming to grips with today?
Obviously, I can't speak for every department, but these last 18 months has said that I think CBSA needs some work.
Thank you very much. Mr. Backrack, now it is your time. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to use my time, Mr. Chair, to move a motion arising from this study on ArriveCan. So I will move that in light of the recent finding that Dalian Enterprises received $7.9 million in funding for its work on ArriveCan while CEO David Yao was an employee of the Department of National Defense, the committee call on Mr. Yao, as well as the following senior officials from the Department of National Defense: Minister of National Defense Bill Blair, Deputy Minister of National Defense Bill Matthews, Associate Deputy Minister Material Troy Crosby, and Assistant Deputy Minister Human Resources Isabel Desmartes, to appear before committee no later than April 1st, 2024 for no less than 2 hours of testimony. And I believe my staff can make that available in writing to the committee.
Thanks, Mr. Backrack. So this is different than the February 29th when you had on notice. I thought that's what was getting.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I'm just making sure if that's correct. Are you just putting this on notice right now, or are you putting it?
No, I'd like to move it and hopefully get to a vote in the minutes that are remaining of our meeting.
Thanks. I was just clarifying, sir. Thanks. Speakers.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
Would you mind if I speak quickly? Mr. Chair?
No, sorry, Mr. Firth. Sorry. We're attending something else, but we'll get to you shortly.
Yeah, I'm saying it's been 3 hours right now, and this is kind of where I think I can be.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I have to ask you to stay, Mr. Firth, and we may be able to get to our last couple of questioning rounds.
like that.
But I just have to ask you to stand by for a bit here. Mr. Sousa, your hand is up. But I will get back to you shortly, Mr. Firth.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chair, this is the revised version that's been submitted, correct? I think we were in agreement with what has been put forward.
Perfect. So we're all in agreement then, colleagues? Wonderful. So adopted. Mr. Firth, we just have two more last interventions, Mrs. Block and then Mr. Baines, but we'll have you out of here shortly. Mrs. Block, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Really quickly, Mr. Firth, do you have any contracts with provincial governments or any municipal governments at this time?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. The Auditor General noted that CBSA identified a resource that was added to one of your task authorizations as a subcontractor, and this resource was KPMG, and she noted that that was unusual. This is one of the 4 largest multinational firms worldwide, and yet they were placed on a tax authorization form as a subcontractor to your company. Do you know who approached KPMG to be put in place as a subcontractor to GC Strategies?
No, I know who approached me from KPMG, but I don't know. I don't know. In front of me right now, I can't comment on that. I'm sorry.
Who was your contact at KPMG?
Again, with all due respect, I'd like to give you that before 5 o'clock since I'm trying to get out of here.
Okay.
In writing.
Okay. At the same time, could you provide us with how much of a commission you would have earned as a result of that resource being placed on a tax authorization form?
Absolutely.
In response to some of the questions or comments that my colleague, Mr. Sousa, made in his previous intervention, the Auditor General, the Procurement Ombuds, the Comptroller General have all indicated that they are deeply concerned with what has been uncovered during this study. They believe that this could be an issue across other departments. In fact, the Auditor General noted 2 other departments. There are 10 investigations ongoing in regards to the irregularities, the mismanagement, and I think what could come down to criminality. And so my question for you actually is, are you aware of something called the Charbonneau loop, a term used in procurement and bidding?
No, sorry, I'm not.
Okay, Charbonneau loops ultimately happen when the pool of companies receiving public sector contracts for a given type of work is small enough that the same companies are sometimes overseeing and sometimes overseen by their peers in that same pool. Have you had any conversations with any of the other companies or firms that were bidding on the same contracts as you?
No, I did not.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. I guess, Chair, in follow-up to my questions around KPMG, I am wondering if you can confirm that we have actually invited KPMG to appear before our committee and if they have responded.
KPMG and all of the subcontractors have been invited, and we're working on dates.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have any?
You've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to confirm then, you said you have done some work in the private sector, and I'm not sure if I heard, did you provide us with a percentage of the work that you do between government and what percentage is from the private sector?
I can speculate to give you an answer, but it would not be 100% accurate. So would you like me to sketch the I don't have the exact number in front of me, and I don't want to do approximations. I'm just wondering, would you like me to get you the exact number or an approximation right now?
Sorry, I thought you had cut out. Yes, if you could just provide us with the percentage of work that you've done for the public sector, and I'm thinking specifically the federal government, the Government of Canada, because it appears you haven't done any work with other levels of government. If you could give us the percentage that you have done with the federal government versus the percentage for the private sector, that would be appreciated.
Okay, I will provide that for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, and we'll finish up with you, Mr. Baines, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Firth, you said GC strategy stands for Government of Canada Strategies. Don't you think that's misleading?
Not really. We didn't think so in 2015.
But you said you've worked here for 2007. Since 2007, you're not an employee of the government. Like, does that not give the sense that you solely do work for Government Canada? You talked about doing private work as well.
Yeah, not really. I mean, we used the acronym GC. We didn't spell out Government of Canada strategies. It could be open for interpretation. I mean, I don't think so.
To me, it's misleading. I think my issue here is that I think since you've been working here with government offices and public officials in the different departments since 2007, and it appears they've got comfortable with you doing the work, and you claim that you've done great work, and that's why you're getting through these, navigating the processes. Don't you think that's an unfair advantage to those who have long-standing experience with government contracts by continuing to, maybe like the member before called, the loop of attaining these contracts over and over, and others are at a disadvantage just because you may be more familiar, more comfortable with these officials who've also been working there for decades. What do you have to say about that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
I just don't like the fact that
I don't make the decision, right? I don't make the decision.
No, I understand that, but I just don't like the fact that I don't like the fact that people are getting comfortable in receiving these contracts. Then we may have officials who are comfortable with people who may have possibly built relationships with and continue to keep getting these contracts.
He's not that dumb.
Do you believe that that's something that's happening here?
I think that,
and this is since 2007. So we're talking 2007 to now it's 2024. You're still around.
I think
this has nothing to do with what they're
not
investigating.
anymore.
Nothing.
I kind of think that
almost a filibuster.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I think there's again, the decisions are made by the government. They obviously see value in what I do. I've had 65 contracts since 2015. So I believe that you do a good job, then that becomes recognized. That can become a referral. It can be something you put a feather in your cap. So when you go to propose a solution the next time, these are jobs well done. I think it's just sales.
I want to go back to earlier. You said something about the vendors aren't screened, or is this? So you said you had 35 people that you subcontract out to, but they're not required to be screened. Is that accurate?
No, I said they actually, for ArriveCan specific, right? They actually had 2 lines of security.
It's very
there was PSBC security and then CBSA specific security.
But they can't speak directly to them? Is that what it is?
No, they can speak directly to them. They cannot give a contract directly to them. They're not a qualified vendor.
Okay, so...
I'm with you, Calamaru.
If you look at earlier questions regarding the pay being determined. I just wanted to sort of get some clarity on that as well. So these 35 subcontractees, they can't say, this is my price. They have to fall within a certain.
They can 100%, as long as so you have the price of the crown, and whatever the price they actually ask for is typically what we give them. So they can be anything from zero to the ceiling price. That's where the negotiations happen, which is how margin is determined. There's no cutoff saying you must get paid this. It's they get what they ask for. If they want 1,000, if they want 1,100, if they want 1,200, and the bill rate is full. This is why there's a difference between industry standards of 15% to 30%.
Okay, Mr. Chair, that's all the questions I have, but I do want to say that I'm looking forward to, reviewing these processes, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Commissioner of the Competition Bureau coming before us to see where we need to do things better, considering this has been going on since 2007. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Mr. Baines. I thank everyone for sticking with us a bit past time. Yes, I'll get you, Mr. Genuis. Mr. Firth, thanks as well. Just quickly before you leave, Mr. Firth, Mr. Genuis, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And I think you can dismiss the witness, but having heard the totality of his testimony, I think it's important to raise a question of privilege regarding his non-responses. Thank you.
Mr. Firth, we're going to dismiss you right now. Thank you for your time. I appreciate
Thank you, Chair. Can you also ask the clerk to summarize for me what I'm sending you back in, please? And I also asked that I would even be home by 5 o'clock, so could that be later on in the evening, please?
Yes, I think we'll say 8 p.m. tonight, sir.
Tomorrow morning? Oh, sure. I'll try. 8 p.m. is... I'd rather, if it's still possible, to get it to you tomorrow morning. That's possible.
9 a.m. tomorrow morning?
Perfect.
Okay, we'll do it for 9, and the clerk will send you an email with outlining what we're looking for. Before I get to you, Mr. Beck, thanks, Mr. Firth. We'll dismiss you. I see Mr. Backrack, but Mr. Genuis says point of privilege. I think he's bringing up. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Simply this, that Mr. Firth has refused to answer direct questions that have been put to him by the Chair on behalf of this committee. This witness has shown complete disregard for the prerogatives and responsibilities of parliamentary committees when it comes to getting answers for Canadians. Chair, I believe that this is a violation of the privileges of this committee and that this needs to be attended to ensure that all parliamentary committees can insist upon responses to direct questions that are asked. Chair, if you agree that this is an issue of privilege, then I will be prepared to move the appropriate motion.
I've looked and I've chatted with the analysts, and I believe it is, sir.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Then my motion is that the committee instruct the clerk and analyst to prepare a report to the House, which the Chair shall table forthwith, outlining the potential breach of privilege concerning Kristian Firth's refusal to answer those questions which the committee agreed to put to him and his prevarication in answering others.
Thank you. The clerk is just sending it out to everyone's P9 right now. I'm happy to suspend for about a minute till it gets out to everyone.
All right, guys. We're going to wrap it up. All they've got left is to adjourn. So we're dropping over here, getting rid of that. What a crazy way to spend an afternoon around some very entertaining politicians. Some of the Tories are amazing. Mike Barrett is super fun to watch. Jen Wee is very great. Kelly Block is amazing. Who else was up there today? Anyhow, I like Macaulay too. Seems a little bit more in the middle, but he's all right. That Firth is lying to us. It would seem to me. I don't know. That's just my opinion, my take. I don't know. What did you see? What do you think? Yeah. 3 hours sitting in the chair, one spot. I got to get up and walk around for a little while. Super fun. Love hanging out. Amazing chat. Thank you, Dive Crew. Who else? Oh, FYMM. Also, thank you so much. Thank everybody for tuning in and watching. We've got to watch the politics, guys, because if we don't, the word's not going to get out. This is not going to be covered in corporate media, right? Like mainstream stuff just won't be. Now, we're going to get going. I hope I got to say hello to everybody that came in the room. I try my best to be paying attention to that and say hello and give a quick shout out. Sometimes I miss. That's never intentional. I answer every question. I like everybody here. It's amazing what we've grown here. A couple of new people, I think, in the room today, which is fun. Welcome. We have fun here. You can see that we've got many like-minded thinking people. Like it's just I like our chat room because it doesn't need to be monitored or there's nobody being outrageous. Like not too much. And of course, a little bit of frustration with the times we're in. Only makes sense. Anyways, gang, we're going to wrap up for now. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll be catching you next time. And we'll be back tomorrow with more. There's more investigating to be done. So we'll check it out tomorrow. Hey, Mike, what's up? Just dropped in, I think. So anyways, we're going to get going. If I missed you earlier, Mike, sorry about that. It happens. We'll be back tomorrow. Later, gang. Ehren, Question Period Canada. Like, subscribe, share, get notified, all of that stuff. Canadian federal politics. Right here. Have something healthy to eat, and remember to stay warm. We'll catch you tomorrow.